Good evening and welcome to Monday's June 23rd, 2025 City Council meeting. I will first await a motion to leave the non-public session and to seal the minutes of that non-public session.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Kelly, will you please take the roll?
Yes, Mayor. Mayor McCaffrey,
Here.
Assistant Mayor Kelly,
Here.
Councilor Tabor,
Here.
Councilor Cook,
Here.
Councilor Denton,
Here.
Councilor Blaylock,
Present.
Councilor Bagley,
Here.
Councilor Moreau,
Here.
Councilor Lombardi.
Here. Before we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd just like to remember Sarah Reardon-Gott, who passed away unexpectedly last week. She leaves behind a husband, Gary, and boys, Connor and Wyatt, along with a whole community around the seacoast that really misses her, and just want to send our thoughts and prayers to this Portsmouth grad. And for the Pledge of Allegiance, I'm going to ask the Little League boys, or 8-year-old boys, to lead us. Do you mind standing up and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Take it away, guys.
Go ahead. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great job. First up, acceptance of minutes for May 5th, 2025.
So moved. Second.
Any questions? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? First, we have a Public Art Review Committee park recommendation for the location of proposed Ferry House sculpture from Friends of the South End, Fosse.
Your Honor, I move to accept the Ferry House sculpture from Friends of the South End.
Second.
Your Honor, I have to recuse myself from this vote as I'm a board member from Friends of the South End.
It's a great organization, and look forward to the Ferry House sculpture being there. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next up, we have a chance to recognize our Portsmouth 8-year-old Colby Classic baseball champions. They're with us here tonight, and as part of being, there's a lot of New Franklin kids. You know, we love all our elementary schools equally, but as a part of being a New Franklin dad, I was on a text chain with some of the coaches, and just seeing how impressive you guys were throughout your year, and especially in this tournament. Wanted to make sure that we recognized you in City Hall, and to encourage you in your upcoming game against Kittery on July 1st, which is a Tuesday. Hopefully it's Central, but I know that Mikey, all right, at Central, that I hope to be able to call the Battle of the Bridges, and for us to come out in a show of support for you guys. So I would ask your coaches to say a few words, if they can, just about the grit and determination you guys have. But I just, it's important, and you see some other champions up here in Portsmouth High School girls lacrosse and the boys high school lacrosse. You learn a lot in sports. You learn how to win. You learn what you do when you lose. You learn that hard work pays off, and it certainly paid off for you guys. We'll let the pencil bats slide. I still don't understand that phenomenon, but just really impressed with you, and want to make sure that you understand that 23,000 people in Portsmouth who don't get to come to all your games are really proud when we see you guys try your best. And luckily this time, when you tried your best, it meant you didn't play much more than 4 innings at a time, because you were so good. But it won't always be as easy, but we know that you're always going to work as hard. So just want to celebrate you tonight. say these words, and then we'll grab a picture.
Mayor McEachern, council members, we really appreciate you guys having us tonight. These boys, not only did they win the Colby Classic 9U tournament as 8-year-olds, they're a fantastic representation of Portsmouth Little League and what it is now and what it's going to continue to grow to be. And great listeners, hard workers, always smiling, always having fun. And we couldn't be more proud of them, and special group of guys, and we're going to keep this going. And again, we're really honored to be here, so we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Coach Joe. Take a picture in front here. Council, do you want to?
Oh, you want all of us?
Yeah, I guess we'll have I get the parents.
All of us?
I don't think they need them.
All right, ready? 1, 2, 3.
Excellent job.
I saw Richard. He's recreation. He should go. He's a coach.
Best part of our job. That stuff.
It's one of my least favorite parts.
They have the low chairs.
You should take your chances.
You shrunk.
Yeah.
Third.
End of second, beginning of third. Adorable.
Coach. So cute.
So next up, this is Titletown here in Portsmouth. Portsmouth High School girls lacrosse team, back-to-back division state champions. And I know my younger sister is watching with my mother, but she was one of the first when they started the program, quite a few years ago. So Molly, it's come a long way. But Portsmouth finished the season with a record of 20-0, and now takes a 27-win game streak into next year. It was the second straight Division One state championship for the Clippers, who have played in 9 straight championships since 2016, winning 7. Congratulations to head coach Jojo Curro and the team, especially seniors Morgan Runke, Abby Stacy, both said that winning the championship in their final game and going undefeated was even better than winning last year's state championship when they were juniors. Well, it's always hard to repeat, but just want to send our congratulations. And I know that they couldn't be here tonight, so we're just going to have to cheer loud enough for them to hear us at home. So awesome job, ladies. And finally, a Clipper Pride shout out to Portsmouth High School boys lacrosse, who won the NHIAA Division II state title on June 14th for the second consecutive year, their 4th championships in the last 5 years. This win didn't come easily. Head coach Chad Vischer said, "The first day we were optimistic, and then within 3 weeks, our optimism got turned upside down. It was very apparent we were young and we needed to coach it all up." Portsmouth started the season with a 5-4 record, playing a tough schedule in the first half of the season. Portsmouth won 8 of its final 9 regular season games. If that's not grit, I don't know what is. So congratulations, boys, Portsmouth lacrosse. You earned it here. And then we have, thought we were keeping this as a surprise, but we can't because it's on the agenda. Trick. rules are rules. But in recognition, and I was told there's words I'm not allowed to say in this, and so I will note this, but recognition and appreciation of Deputy City Manager Suzanne Woodland. She is moving on into a different role within the city, and I just want to express on behalf of the council and myself personally how much she's meant to the city of Portsmouth. There's some quote out there that, find somebody that tells you the truth and, and take them everywhere you go. And Suzanne is somebody that speaks the truth to just about, I've never seen her kind of soften any words to anybody. But it comes from a place of, and with, all city employees, there's a love of Portsmouth, there's a love of service. Suzanne has led some of our most complicated, entanglements, whether or not that's, jousting with the EPA, dealing with CSX. There's just, there's too many, but there's always been a camaraderie there when you're talking about an issue. Hopefully you're on the right side of it, like the same side. But being able to get to the truth is something that we're not going to miss because she's not going too far in the city of Portsmouth, but we are very, very fortunate to have had all of the work for Suzanne as Deputy City Manager, and we'll miss her not being in that role. She's deserving of many more eloquent words than I can express, but she was one of the best in that role. So we'll miss you very much, Suzanne.
Your Honor, if I might, and as she approaches the podium, stay right where you are, lady. To play off of what the mayor said, if you've been hired by me or you've worked with me long enough, you've heard me say I don't surround myself with yes men or yes women, and she is not a yes man, and that's one of the many things I've come to appreciate and respect about her. To say thank you feels woefully inadequate. Suzanne literally walked into the role of Deputy City Manager, not because anyone asked her, but because she noticed it needed doing, and it needed doing by her personality. And I might get upset. She just knew how to support the team, and me particularly, in different places. We're all thrilled she's going to remain a resource to the city in the capacity of part-time regulatory counsel, primarily assisting and updating ordinances within the public works realm, but she will always remain a valuable resource to us. She was kind to write her letter of thoughtfulness to me and called it gratitude and change, and I think I'd like to turn that phrase around to her because she's done so many things for which we are all grateful and have changed this place in many ways, as the mayor mentioned. But without even trying that hard, it was in her nature to pave the way to create a blueprint for identifying and executing organizational change. And that came from helping with 3 transitions of departments, that helped with the standing up of an IT department, that helped with advocating for things that really benefited the employees and in turn will make us work smarter. And I asked a couple colleagues if they could come up with a word for Suzanne, and I believe the word was unflappable. And she really has maintained her calm, cool presence. She's been just the right person at the right time for the right job. And she brought out the best in the staff and to me. So I'd just like to say thank you to my friend, to my colleague, to a mentor, to Suzanne. Thank you.
Well, that's going to be hard to follow. And I, too, was kind of like, I had to write things down in case I got too emotional about this. So I'll just follow up with gratitude in that I thank the city manager for the opportunity to serve. as the city's deputy city manager for these last 3 years. I discovered new skills that I did not know I had, new interests, and frankly, new joys. I have to really thank the administrative staff in the city manager's office and the legal department who did their best to support my sometimes chaotic and diverse tasks and commitments. I have to say thank you to my partner, Steve, for being an occasional sounding board and frequent cook. As you know, late days and nights in this position means it can be challenging to find something healthy and nutritious and tasty to cook. And as I'm pointing out his cooking skills, he should be also called out for routinely, there we go, supplying former city attorney Bob Sullivan with meals as well. And speaking of Bob Sullivan, thank you to Bob for wooing me away from the McLean Law Firm to come to the city of Portsmouth full-time. I have never once regretted that decision to come to work for the city of Portsmouth, even through the bad days. And, you know, I've been here over, 21 years, and some of you will know there have been some very difficult days, but never once have I said I made the wrong decision. So I set aside my deputy city manager responsibilities with a somewhat heavy heart. I love my work for the city manager. I find her collaborative and compassionate. Key properties for me. I love my work for and with the people of this organization. We have some remarkable public servants across all departments and across all levels. I love my work for the City Council. And that holds true even when I disagree with you. And as the mayor pointed out, there are any number of times when I began with, I love you, but I don't think you've considered ... And I love this community. It has been many years since I lived here in Portsmouth, but I don't think you have to live here to love this community. So I am looking forward to a bit of rest and play during the month of July. And with fewer responsibilities when I return in August, I look forward to the extra time and energy to unfold and evolve the other interests and loves and forms of service, frankly. I will continue to lead meditation at the Portsmouth Public Library, which is where you may find my wealth of both compassion and general calm and joy. So you're all welcome to join me when I'm leading there. And while I will officially retire from my role of Deputy City Manager at the end of this month, it almost goes without saying I will remain available to the City Manager and to this city. So with my deepest gratitude and respect, thank you.
After public comment. Your Honor, Your Honor, should I do that? Your Honor, can I make a motion to suspend the rules to bring up item under my name? C number 1.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Those opposed.
Thank you, Your Honor. So on the agenda, you can see we have a report back from the Recreation Board to rename the Portsmouth Skate Park in honor of Chris Rice. So I'll make the motion to request on behalf of the Recreation Board that the City Council rename the Portsmouth Skate Park the Chris Rice Skate Park.
Second.
And I'll just, this is a big one. I had the pleasure of working with Chris on the site selection committee. I had a pleasure working on him on the skate park committee. I knew Chris before that. He's also my neighbor. But I knew him when he owned Identity Skate Shop. A bunch of my buddies worked for him then. And I remember the community he created downtown for all the skaters. And back then, that was when skateboarding was illegal. I remember a buddy of mine getting a ticket, skateboarding in his own driveway. And, and it was a hard time for guys that that was their way of exercising. That was what they wanted to do. That was their passion. And people got in their way. Chris paved a path for all those people. That skate park wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Chris. But if it's all right with you, I think there's some people here in the audience that would like to come up and speak. If I could invite them up to come speak and say a few words.
Councilor Cooks?
Your Honor, I move to suspend the rules to allow people from the audience to speak on this subject.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
But yeah, if there's anyone here that would like to speak in honor of Chris.
Good evening, Council. My name is Ollery Lane. I'm a skateboarder's mom. That's really different than being a soccer mom. Really different than being a soccer mom. I've known Chris. I first met Chris in 1989. Chris was 26. My son was 16. And we used to frequent Eastern Border in Nashua back in the day when skateboarding wasn't nearly as popular as it was. Still illegal, lots of places. But Chris gave my son Ben his first job at Eastern Border. And I'd already spent a lot of money at that shop. But I have to tell you that even at 26 years old, Chris had a look that he could give kids, and they just followed him. He had a laugh, and I'm sure Councilor Blaylock knows that look that I'm talking about and that laugh. My son now is 42. He lives in San Diego. He's a professional skateboarder, and Chris took Ben, my son, to San Diego for the first time when my son was 18. It was a pretty big deal for this mom to let a 28-year-old take her 18-year-old firstborn to San Diego, hoping he wouldn't fall in love with it, but he did. And, in the words of Tony Hawk, who said, "Skateboarding is my passion," Chris had a passion for skateboarding. He had a passion for kids that were interested, and he would do anything to help kids. And as hard as it is to think about that he's up there and not here, it would be just amazing for you to consider renaming the skate park in his honor. I thank you so much for the consideration. I thank the Parks and Rec folks for voting unanimously to bring this to you. And keep skating.
Thanks, Oliver.
Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. I knew Chris for a while, but in 2009, when I was sitting there on council, we had a councilor who was going to bring forward the fact that no one should be skating and skateboarding in Portsmouth. And Chris and I got together, we talked about it, we rallied, and we came with mediation with a plan so we could still have skateboarding in Portsmouth. In 2011, we tried to do a park. We worked really hard, and Chris worked hours on coming up with a plan and people to do it and a place. However, we failed. And then Seamus Durkin came to me and said, "Esther, the park that we have now is falling apart." And he asked for help, and I went down and met with the boys down at the park and the girls, and there was about 25 of them there, and I heard their story. So who are you going to call? The skateboard king himself, Chris Rice. So I catch up with Chris, and he and I kind of hatched a little plan, and some great people like Amy and Dave and Mr. Blaylock and a bunch of other people, Eric Goodwin, came together. Rich Duddy came together and said, it's time. And we worked really hard. I guess what I would ask, though, tonight is that you amend the motion to say skateboard park. Because the one thing Chris always had a problem with is I would call it a skate park. And then he would go off on me about how there's not going to be anyone over there on 3 wheels, Esther. There's nobody roller skaters. We don't have them in the park. So I guess I would hope that we can name it the Chris Rice Skateboard Park. And if you just add the word board, that would be very nice. Because I know that's what he would really appreciate. He didn't want it to be called the skate park. So I would encourage you to do that. I think this is the best thing we can do for a great man who, I can tell you, changed many, many, many people's lives. I heard it. I heard it over the years. Young men and women he would take into his shop that were lost and needed some guidance, and he was there to guide them. And in the end, he was there to push the skateboard park through. I remembered Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther.
Dave Cosgrove, 174 Echo Ave. Good evening, everyone. I'm not so good on my feet, as you know, so I'm going to read the letter that I wrote to the rec board. So I'd like to share with you why I fully support the naming of the existing park after Chris Rice, and why I believe the dedication of this facility in his honor meets the field naming criteria set forth by the city. First, Chris was indeed an exceptional person who over the course of many decades accomplished a great deal in our community. This list is by no means exhaustive, but I just want to share 10 things. As Esther pointed out, he lobbied the city of Portsmouth for a dedicated park for many decades, long before I ever showed up on the scene. I just showed up at the end to help him get over the finish line. He spearheaded the construction of a DIY park in town. He oversaw efforts to improve the Greenleaf skate park for that interim period while we were waiting for the new park. He donated merchandise, sweat equity, his expertise in design. He continually fostered a sense of skateboarding community throughout his efforts to nurture up-and-coming riders, as well as focus on the well-being of all the riders in our local community and beyond. As we heard earlier, he owned and operated a skateboard shop in our community, Identity Skate Shop. And I can assure you, as was already said, the skate shop offers much more than merchandise. It is not just material things for sale. It is a hub of the community and a safe place for riders to assemble, share, and support one another. Chris actively participated in fundraising activities to support the funding of the new park. He called upon his connections in industry to donate items for auction, as well as initiated partnerships with local businesses such as the Press Room to hold charitable events in which the skate park and city were the sole beneficiaries. We were all but the beneficiaries. He actively shared his skate park design expertise with the contractors involved with the skate park project. He served as a representative of the skateboarding community in the capacity of interacting with these vendors and with city leadership, such as, Director Rice, during the active construction of the park as well. He maintained the cleanliness of the park. He hated graffiti. He hated to see the trash. He took great pride in the presentation of the park. He made himself available when the weather was bad. He would get out there with a shovel, and he often told me that I was shoveling wrong, and this is the right way to do it. It's like, don't shovel it over the drain hole, shovel it off the park. And perhaps most importantly, he regularly skateboarded at the park and served as a trusted ambassador who shared his enthusiasm for the park with all who visited, whether they were local or they were visiting from Quebec. While Chris was certainly active in the New Hampshire skateboarding community, or New Hampshire Seacoast community, his reach far extended our geographical boundary. Chris supported a wide range of other parks and events. I happen to know I grew up in Chelmsford, not far from Nashua. I remember Chris from the early 80s or late 80s We weren't super close, but we had a bunch of friends in common. He was instrumental in bringing another skate park to the town of Nashua, city of Nashua. Chris was absolutely regarded as a passionate member of the skateboarding community and regarded as someone who could truly connect with others in an authentic way to enrich the lives of others. So in closing, I wholeheartedly support the naming of this incredible park after Chris. Chris and I worked closely over the last few years. Great memories. I'm so glad he got to at least spend what limited time he had at the park, and his children got to see him there. Naming the park after him is the right thing to do for his family, his friends, and for the broader community. I knew his reach was extensive, but when I attended his memorial service, it just hit me how many people loved him and how many people were touched by his presence. Thank you very much for considering this. I appreciate it.
Hello. My name's Henry Purple. I grew up on Broad Street. I think everyone has kind of gotten the gist across, but just to add a couple things. I think one thing that people don't grasp a lot is through organized sports, everyone has a certain position. You have the coach, you have the assistants. One of the things with skateboarding is it's very unorganized in nature, and I think that's what attracts a lot of people. But for just in my situation, I met Rice when I was around 11 years old. And in the skateboarding world, I was essentially looking for some sort of mentor. And a lot of the teenagers and kids who are a little bit older than me probably weren't the best people to be following. Rice immediately stepped up, and he saw that I needed some sort of guidance, and he took it upon himself to put in effort and time and care to teach me things and to help me grow into a good person and an adult, and to also help other people in the community. So I think the best way that we could kind of summarize Rice in the community was being somewhat of a coach. He was always there to point out when someone was drifting out of line. He might smack you upside the head and give you tough love, but sometimes that was the way that needed to be delivered. If someone really needed, a softer touch and they need someone to talk to, he was always there to be that as well. I think reasons why we should rename the park are he has had well over a decade of service in the community. He had a skateboard shop for quite a while. He's been trying to get the skate park built for well over a decade. He was there through the behind the scenes process and then also designing it. He was there on the ground floor helping the construction guys make sure all the details were correct. And personally speaking, I have always looked up to Rice as almost like a big brother. He was the person that I could always lean on when things went bad in my life. Sometimes he would be the first person to call and make sure that I was okay. So I've learned a lot from him. I try to implement the things he's taught me and help others as well. And I think it makes a lot of sense to rename the park after him because he's put so much time and effort into this. And I think continuing his legacy and showing other people that putting effort and time into your community can have, benefits is a good thing to do. So that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry.
Hello, Council. My name's Ian Coughlin. I actually don't live here in Portsmouth. I live in Exeter, but as former Deputy City Manager Suzanne Woodland said, you do not have to live here to love Portsmouth. I own a small business in town. I own the skate shop that pretty much follows in the footsteps of Rice's legacy. And if you know anything about owning a small business, I do live here, basically. I live in my store. I know you guys have heard a lot already. I'm going to try and keep it pretty short here. But basically, as many people have already said, the skate shop is not just a place to purchase skateboarding items. In fact, that's essential to us staying in business, but it is secondary to our goal. Our goal is to really give people a place to enjoy skateboarding, and it gives us a clubhouse, a meeting place, a community. We have a couch in the shop. People come, sit down, they watch the newest skate video. We talk about the latest stuff. And inevitably, you wind up talking about life, not just skateboarding. And that's what Rice really excelled at. He was able to talk to people about a lot of their problems and issues. And, you know, like Henry said, he gave him guidance. He was the coach. And just as coaches in sports are often bigger figures than on the field or the court themselves, coaches can be revered family members at this point. And that's that's who Rice was. He really worked hard to create a community. My skate shop would not be here if not for the contributions and the path that Chris paved. I think he put a lot of work into the skate park, and he cared deeply about skateboarding, skateboarders, and this skate park. And so I really appreciate your consideration in renaming the park after Rice. I think it would be great for his legacy. Thank you. Have a good night.
Hello, my name is Ryan Kress, 185 Edmund Ave. Sorry, I'm feeling it. I'm in full support of naming the skate Rice, naming the skate park in Chris's honor. I'm not aware of anyone in this room who had more of an impact on anything more than Chris had on the local skateboard scene. Chris spent years fighting for skaters and skateboarding, from Shit Park to Greenleaf to the soon-to-be renamed skate park. His gift of getting the park built has given me the gift of riding there every morning with my kids. Many mornings after leaving the park and heading to school, we would run into Chris, Lennon, and James at the stoplight near the U-Haul building. He was always smiling, knowing we were coming from the park, and pumping my youngest up, who had a hard time going to school. Just another example of Chris advocating for the youth via skateboarding. The morning I found out Chris had passed, the only thing I knew to do was to head to the park. I wasn't the only one, as about 6 or 7 of us showed up that morning. We didn't know each other, but hugs were shared, stories were told, and new bonds were formed. By the evening, there were over 100, I'd say, along with Chris's family. It speaks volumes. With the loss of Chris was felt some solace being at the park. I asked the council to do the right thing and officially rename the park in Chris's honor. Thank you.
Seeing no one else rise.
Your Honor, I want to make sure we do this right, but I want to honor the family's wishes. If it'd be named Chris Rice Skateboard Park or Chris Rice Skate Park, Chris Rice Skateboard Park, because I do remember Chris Rice correcting me on that as well early, and where we said we're building a skateboard park, Rich. But if the family agrees, then I'd like to honor those wishes. So I'd make a friendly amendment to my motion to name it the Chris Rice Skateboard Park.
Second.
So we have to vote on that one first.
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any questions or comments from the council? Councilor Bagley?
I didn't know Chris as well as many here, but somebody that grew up in the 80s and 90s, and the fact that he was able to get a city to build, an official park. And there's a lot of people that thought maybe we spent too much money, but in the past year, everybody's minds have been changed because of the quality of the park. And I love that everybody can see it, because when you drive by, it's always full. So I think we all knew when he tragically passed that this was the right thing to do. And I want to commend Councilor Playlock for making sure that every T was crossed and every I was dotted to do it the right way.
Councilor Bagley? Any other comments? I'll just say thank you for those letters that we received. There were many of them, along with a petition. We didn't need the petition. We were going to do this, but it's great to get involved. I will say there's nothing that I'm going to say wasn't said about Rice. I'll say just something slightly different, that it's important to name things after great people. It's important certainly for the family, and we want to recognize the contributions that he made. It's also incredibly important to give us a bar to aim for. when we named this the Chris Rice Skateboard Park, not everybody knows Rice or had the pleasure of meeting him, questioning how he always got away with wearing hats everywhere. But they'll look into it a little bit. Ian, you're carrying it on. And it's important because it inspires all of us to live up to an example that Rice set. And so I, as part of the entire council, is very excited to be able to name this in his honor, for his family, for his friends, for his community. Do you want to just speak into the microphone? And I know it's hard to make it. Okay.
I just want to say a legend never dies. And you did it, my son.
Indeed. I'll leave it at that. Kelly, can we have a roll call vote?
Yes. Assistant Mayor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Table?
Yes.
Tabor?
Yes.
Counselor Cook?
Yes.
Counselor Denton?
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock?
Yes.
Counselor Bagley?
Yes.
Counselor Moreau?
Yes.
Counselor Lombardi?
Yes.
Mayor McCachran?
Yes.
Unanimous.
We'll take a 5-minute recess. Thank you. Welcome back. On to public comment, and this is before the public hearing. Public comment limited to 3 minutes. Public hearing on the budget specifically, unlimited, but brevity is always effective form of persuasion. But we'll start with public comment, and Roy Helsel on city taxes.
Roy Helsel, Middle Road, Portsmouth. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I want to talk about taxes in Portsmouth. I understand the city wants to waste our taxpayers' money with 15-minute free parking program that will cost us taxpayers a loss of revenue of $476,000, as the article stated in the newspaper. Have you thought about the taxpayers, the 22,000 residents, 23,000 residents who are having a rough time with taxes now since our property evaluations went up? My evaluation went up 75%. Then it has been presented to let out our state veterans park free. Out-of-state veterans. It was presented to have this in our town. Why? I'm a veteran. I've never used or wanted to use this program. I don't have anything against anyone, any veteran that does or needs to use free parking. I have a problem with we have 23,000 residents in Portsmouth, but many of us are not affluent and have always to consider how we spend our funds. So I think that many of the programs that affect our taxes should be voted on by all the residents when they will affect our taxes. Now the district and state want to have a volunteer system for our school system, voucher system. It will allow any family to choose what schools, private, religious, or any other school that they want to personally send their child to. Hey, come on out of here. Why do we as taxpayers have to use our taxes for family personal choices? Has the city gone to the district or the state or to our representatives to complain about this? For using our taxes for family personal choices when we already pay taxes for public schools. The statement that many residents do not come downtown because of parking. What about the cost of everything? The prices are always going up, and you don't think that is continue raising the city property taxes. Water 9% raised this year, sewers 4%, and a year, and then raising our city budget $23.5 million in 3.5 years.
Ray, we're moving on to the public hearing. You can come back in the public hearing and finish up the budget portion.
Okay, but that's all right. We don't have residents have to pay for family personal choices. That's what I don't like.
Thank you, Roy. Next up, we have Dave, Esther Kennedy. Are you speaking on this? Okay. Next up, Jim Lee. Do you want to speak now or at the public hearing? Sounds good. All right.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council all. Jim Lee, 520 Sagamore Avenue. I'd like to say that Portsmouth taxpayers deserve tax clarity and accountability when it comes to school spending, but recent budget discussions have raised more questions than answers. Since 2001, Portsmouth's public school enrollment has declined from 2,706 students down to 2,428 in 2024. Yet over that same period, per pupil spending has skyrocketed from $15,800 to $25,000 per student. This year's school budget is increasing about 2.9%, or maybe more, yet we're being told that's a cut. In reality, it's an increase, just not as much as some officials has planned. That may feel like a cut in a spreadsheet, but to most taxpayers, more money spent is still more money spent. And here's a common sense comparison. I used to own a couple of restaurants. If we had fewer customers, we would reduce our food orders and staffing. If a business had fewer sales, it would adjust operations. That's not a crisis, it's reality. Shouldn't our city be expected to operate with the same sense of fiscal responsibility? Taxpayers aren't against supporting great schools, but it's fair to ask, why are we spending record amounts of money to educate fewer students? That dog won't hunt. If the conversation continues to confuse increases with cuts and assumes public jobs should be guaranteed regardless of enrollment trends, more residents will begin to question how our money is being managed. It's time for honest budgeting and smarter stewardship of our shared tax dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Next up, Kristen Gray on public session.
Hello, Council. I apologize. I actually put my name and my sister's name, and I'm going to have her speak on our behalf.
Okay. Yep. Happy. Jennifer?
Good evening, councilors. My name is Jennifer Gray, and I stand here representing the Gray family. We are owners of 126 Bridge Street, currently known as the Ferguson Building. I know you received our letter, as I noted, an agenda item forthcoming, so I will be very brief. I know you have a lofty agenda. I'm here to publicly reiterate our strong opposition to the proposed zoning amendment in Chapter 10. As you know, our property is surrounded by newly built high-rise development and sits at the bottom of Hill Street, which is very aptly named. Any future development, should it ever even be considered, which it is not currently, would never reach the heights of these structures due to our location, and our property does not encroach on any residents. So it is our stance that C5 zoning is the only reasonable option for our property, and anything short of this would be spot zoning. So if you have any questions, our contact information is in the letter. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jennifer. And just a quick note on that, so you don't have to stick around for the rest of the meeting. We have to, we'll have to take up any changes to that at the July 14th per the notice period. So we will take action on the letter, but it will not be to affect that until July 14th, if action will be taken to adjust that.
Understood.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Next up, Petra Huda. So many topics, so little time. Well, good news, Petra. You do have an unlimited amount of time at the public hearing, but you can have 2 bites of the apple.
Petra Huda, 280 South Street. This will be a primer, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, good. Set us up.
So I was waiting for something, anything, any answers to my questions. I haven't seen them. I don't see them in the agenda. So again, no answers. Some things for you to consider. You have increased the budget by $23.5 million since you've been in. That's you increased our property taxes last year, and then this year we're told another $300 to $500 for some of us. Without any consideration of decreases, I don't see anything here. I will be pleasantly surprised if somebody pops one out as we go along here, but it doesn't look that way. The other thing, so you've increased our property taxes. On top of that increase, you've increased our water rates by 9%. You've increased our sewer rates by 4%. And also, a little note for those who had been switched over to community power, those rates will probably go up or not go down. And people are faced with another utility that's going up because there are no guarantees there. Are there, Councilor Tabor? So I'd like to remind you of the rest of the chaos that's going on in the rest of the economy and how us residents are going to be burdened by all of the tsunami coming down on us from the feds and from the state. And I ask you, please consider some of the things that I requested that you look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. That's it for anybody signed up and hasn't spoken. Anyone on Zoom?
No hands.
No hands on Zoom. We will now go to the public hearing and vote on ordinances. This is the continuation of the public hearing for the FY26 budget. We will open that up to speakers. 2 for, against.
Buzz Sure, 390 Greenleaf Avenue. The crutches are a vain effort to engender sympathy from the council. One point in terms of that I wanted to point out, I've talked to some on the council about this, but as to the city manager's police budget, if we do not fund the 3 positions that are currently not going to be funded under the city manager's budget, it causes a problem that I think is addressable, but I just want to let everybody know that the police department has been paying for the overtime from those unspent salaries, that money. If that money doesn't exist, then we're going to have to find the money some other place, be it this council increasing the overtime budget or us coming back to the council and saying we're over the overtime budget, and therefore we need whatever the right language is, a supplemental allocation of money. I think it's a solvable problem, but I wanted to put it on the table so everybody knows that.
Thank you, Commissioner Sure.
Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. First, I'd like to thank the public out there who have sent the numerous emails, text messages, and have stopped down at the marina to tell us thank you for, in particular, Peter Huda and myself, for attending all the budget meetings and have been participating. We have not missed one. We have been to every one. And I just want to thank everyone for all your support. The sad thing is people are scared to come. And I think you've heard gotten some emails because they feel of retribution. That's sad in our public today. But I'm going to make it really simple tonight. You've heard me talk now many times. You, the council of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, 9 of you, have raised the budget $23.5 million in 3.5 years as of July 1st. You have, the 9 of you, created 32.4 positions in 3.5 years. The 9 of you, this year alone, unless it changes, are going to vote for a 9% water increase and a 4% sewer increase. The 9 of you, I guess it'll be the next meeting, unless you change it, will be voting for a $40 million bond potential. $40 million. If that $40 million bond potential goes into our coffers and voted in, that will mean that the 9 of you in 3.5 years, as of July 1st, will have bonded $154 million. $154 million. Now, We know that we're in trouble for $8 million for community power. We know that on the docket, you are looking to potentially add 15 minutes for free parking if you have the app at $476,000. If we do that just for the app, the 9 of you will have raised the budget $24 million in 3.5 years. If you add the $154,000 or $154 million for bonding and $24 million, the 9 of you have cost this city a total of $167.5 million in 3.5 years. This is not sustainable. I've asked you to look at revenues. I've asked you to look at ways that we can cut things and maybe look at as positions when people retire. We relook at every position, and I have not seen any move to any of those directions. This is not sustainable, folks. And the 9 of you are going to be making some choices tonight, potentially, and in our July meeting that will affect the 22,000 residents that are paying the bills. I know that's a burden. It's a big burden. But in that position, it's your number one burden of making sure Portsmouth is affordable to live for all Portsmouth. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. And thank you for coming to every budget work session.
Good evening, everyone. Nancy Noveline Clayburgh, 405 FW Hartford Drive. I want to begin by saying that I deeply respect the commitment and dedication that you are making to our city in your role as a city councilor. Having been there, I know and understand the time, energy, and compassion that it takes to be in your role. Voting on the city budget is one of the most challenging decisions that takes place every year. Thank you so very much. I just have a few points that I would like to bring up. I would like to take a moment to mention that the school budget changed since COVID due to the funding from ESSER, which, as you know, has now expired. It was wonderful to have that additional funding during a time of crisis for our schools and really for all of us. Now we have to make up for some of those areas that are no longer funded due to this government assistance. This has been challenging for the school board and our administration. I would like to address the fact that the ongoing teacher contract negotiations prevented us from including that line item in the school budget. That happens every 3 years as negotiations take place during the budget season. As you know, the resulting contract was very favorable to the taxpayer. Not only did the teachers union agree to a COLA increase for the next 3 years, but it agreed to pay more for their health insurance for the next 3 years. And as you know, because the teachers are the largest union in the city, other contracts often follow their lead. That should result in a fair outcome for the taxpayer. So to say that the school budget is in excess of 5%, I believe is unfair. It's a factor that occurs every time negotiations are in process, which is every 3 years. I'd like to talk about block scheduling for a moment. We have had much success with this method for over 20 years. Our teacher schedules are full. There are no empty slots, and I'll tell you why. Students that are challenged academically have the flexibility to repeat a class if they were not successful the first time around. For those that excel academically, they have the opportunity to go above and beyond the requirements and take advantage of more advanced courses. The course opportunities for our students are robust. Block scheduling makes it possible for students to be successful no matter what level they are at. This makes it extremely equitable for our students. We are very proud of that. I would like to ask you to not to rely on comments that you have heard from students, staff, and parents, unless it is a large number. As elected officials, we get comments from citizens, but doesn't it seem that we only get the negative comments rather than the positives? People tend to complain rather than compliment. Our high school has just over 1,000 students, and there are 2,500 students in our district. Unless you have heard from a large number of people, I would suggest that these comments are not necessarily those of the entire body. According to the U.S. News and World Report, our schools do very well. Portsmouth High School ranks number 15 out of 93 schools in New Hampshire. 2 of our elementary schools have received blue ribbon status, and our middle school ranks 9th out of 268 middle schools in the state. That's awesome. Now, I'd like to talk just a little bit about test scores. We track our student performance with the state test scores. If we go back to 2019 and look longitudinally, there are some striking accomplishments to note. Over the last 5 years, student scores have recovered from pre-COVID levels in nearly all grade levels in content areas. This is a rare achievement. Many schools across the country are still struggling to close what has been called the COVID learning gap. In our schools, with the support of our talented teachers and dedicated administrators, our students have not only closed this gap, but are showing that they continue to learn and make academic progress across the board. And I just wanted to talk a minute about the science scores that Councillor Blaylock brought up at our last meeting. In 2022, our science scores were 46% proficient. In 2023, it was 55% proficient. In 2024, it was 56% proficient. Over those 3 years, our score went up 10%. So I think that's showing deep progress in our science scores. Overall, we are very pleased with the upward trajectory of our standardized test scores, which reflect the hard work and dedication of our teachers, staff, and administrators. As learning institutions, Portsmouth schools exemplify the belief that everyone, students and staff alike, can continue to learn, grow, and strive to become the best versions of themselves. Thank you, and good luck with your vote tonight.
Thank you, Chair Kleberg.
Byron Maddow, 17 Fields Road, serving on the Portsmouth School Board. Good evening, Mayor, councilors, and neighbors. Thank you for letting me speak. First, I know your role is difficult, and I know that all of you give your service earnestly and with the best intentions. I rise tonight not with a spreadsheet and numbers, but with a sense of urgency and a plea. What happens in this chamber over the next hours will set a precedent whether Portsmouth's classrooms remain a place where curiosity blooms or a place where we ration opportunity because we are too cautious. Now, I have a confession. I was a terrible student. I never did my homework. I was always chasing some shiny thing. So trust me when I say, I know what it looks like when someone has missed the assignment. This budget was not that. The school board did the work, thoroughly, thoughtfully, and within the schedule. Now, just because some didn't like the answers doesn't mean we didn't do it. 3 years ago, we spent $2.9 million on out-of-district special education tuition and services. Next year, the bill is projected at $5.17, a 78% climb, including a single-year spike of 34% in this cycle alone. Those dollars are non-negotiable. They invoice us whether we are ready or not, regardless of what bottom lines we set. Yet the city manager's proposal meets the tidal wave not by funding the very positions that aim to keep students in district. 3 kindergarten paraeducators, an elementary intensive needs case manager, kids therapeutic at the middle school, and the director of counseling position. If we fail to see the value of those safety valves today, future years' bill may climb even higher. while the general classroom shrinks to pay for it. This is not prudence. It is a slow motion transfer of funds out of the classroom. Councillor Bagley said it best. The sooner we address children's needs at a younger age, the more money we're going to save some future council. Early literacy support, speech services, social and emotional learning, these are not luxuries. They are the levee that keeps a trickle of challenges from becoming a flood of costly placements and other outsized remediations. Our budget re-engineers high school retirements to fund exactly that levee. The paraprofessionals I've referenced, the K-5 intensive needs, and the other positions we are asking for. The manager's budget wipes them away. Now back to the question of homework. At the June 9 work session, it was suggested that the council could assign homework to the school board. Now, with respect, the board is a body elected by the same citizens who put you on this dais. And in that role, I always welcome dialogue, but I reject directives. Our mandate set by statute and by the ballot box is to deliver the best public education possible and to bring you the budget required to do it. Anything less would betray the voters who entrusted us with their children. This is how we earn and maintain the public confidence. 2 years ago, only 34% of PHS students were proficient in the state science exam. Our curriculum and instruction team rebuilt both schedule and scope, and proficiency has leapt to 60%. That outperforms the state average and most neighboring districts and has been climbing for 2 years. In fact, on every tested subject, Portsmouth is roughly 1.25 to 2 standard deviations above the statewide high school mean. Its combined scores are in the top 5% of New Hampshire public high schools. And by publicly suggesting that our schools are failing in this regard, not only is factually inaccurate, but it also undermines and undercuts the tireless efforts of our school staff, but more importantly, it sells our students short. Moreover, what makes no sense to me is if one did take the position that these scores were in fact failing, why would you advocate for fewer resources? In fact, I have now heard multiple times that the manager's proposed budget is not austere enough, that we should aim for 0%. Is the goal to drive us to the back of the class? Because today we sit in the front row, delivering to Portsmouth residents the high level of education and instruction they rightfully deserve and expect. So let me set the record straight. While we all aspire for greater achievement, and there is always room for improvements, Portsmouth High School excels academically. Many of us in this room have children who have those pandemic years baked into their growth rings. And it is a great credit to our school staff, administrators, and the students themselves that we have in fact accelerated in our achievement while leading the pack. And how did we get there? By investing in curriculum leaders, mapping gaps, coaching teachers, and aligning assessments, exactly the positions voices now label as overhead or non-student facing. Cut these people and we cut the engine that is pulling our school scores out of the pandemic ditch. The budget as proposed is objectively a reduction in service in our public schools. But maybe more damaging is the pattern it starts, one that allows costs we don't control to eat into our classroom instruction and general services. These are not abstract line items. They are adults who steady a child's hands on the first day of school, a specialist who keeps neurodiverse learners in town instead of on a bus to Concord, the coach who turns the C in chemistry into a passion for STEM that is going to be so very, very critical in our rapidly changing future state. You can embrace the headline number that looks tidy for this cycle and discover next year that the special ed bill has eaten the raise you just granted firefighters. Or you can invest a fraction more, less than 1% over the manager's target, to keep the staff who stem that tide, sustain rising test scores, and safeguard the very property value premium Portsmouth enjoys because families want to live inside these attendance lines. Portsmouth has never prospered by aiming for adequacy. We punch above our relative size, but excellence is perishable. One austere season can undo years of patient cultivation. I ask you to push past the self-imposed ceiling. Fund the positions that protect our classrooms and honor the partnership voters forged when they elect all of us to do hard, hopeful work together. Fund the school board's budget. Let's keep Portsmouth learning, thriving, and leading, because our children deserve nothing less, and because that, in the end, that is the homework our citizens assigned to every one of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Byron.
Good evening. My name is Tish Campbell. I live at 322 Lafayette Road, and I'm here tonight to speak as a school board member, encouraging the City Council to support the budget that we have put forward for this upcoming fiscal year. The school budgets process started formally in the fall of this year. Of last year. Our leadership team from central office worked with each administration team at all the school departments. These administrators are the experts of our schools and our students. They, above anyone else, understand firsthand what the students in Portsmouth need is to succeed, not only as students, but beyond their years in the Portsmouth School District. Our experts worked with central office to present to the school board the best budget possible to maintain what the previous year's educational experience was for our students. Unfortunately, that budget could not be met with the city's tight budget restrictions. There was quite a bit of work done in our school department to find ways to cut the budget, including a successful early retirement incentive. After many months of reworking the budget, the school board members voted on a budget presented to the City Council. It is not the recommended increase that the City Council would like to see. However, if the school department met that recommended budget, we could potentially be looking at losing 7 positions in the school department. These positions are professionals that work either directly or indirectly with our student body. Each position has a role in our school system that is fundamental in each student's career. Portsmouth has always been a leader in education in this area, going back to a lot further when I was a Clipper in the late 1980s. I raised my 2 sons in Portsmouth and am now a representative of the school department because that's how proud I am of my alma mater. To vote in a budget any less than what the school experts have recommended would be taking away the resources that have made Portsmouth a sought-after city to raise a family. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Tish. Any other speakers?
Good evening. My name is Monica Kaiser. I reside at 144 Park Street in Portsmouth. And own the property there. I'm a Portsmouth taxpayer. I'm here to speak to you as a Portsmouth parent of school children who, the second and last of whom just graduated from the Portsmouth High School. And I urge you, frankly, to do whatever you can to support the school budget that's been requested. And I can only say, I mean, I don't know why. I agree with Councilor School Board Member Claiborne about people only show up to complain. And it's easy to show up and when you want to complain. It's hard to show up to say something nice. And as I reflected on the time my younger son's graduation, I really thought about this is just such a wonderful place to raise a kid. There are a lot of wonderful things about Portsmouth in terms of the way it's grown over the years. But there are really a lot of wonderful things about the school system. And I have sat down and I've written probably close to a dozen names of teachers that have directly contributed to my kids' well-being. And I'm a working mom. You know, I'm not going to come out every time you guys do a budget. I'm not going to come to every school board meeting. There's a lot of parents like us, people home with young kids trying to take care of the day-to-day. And that's only gotten harder in the last few years, particularly since COVID. And I can say that you may find in many of your day jobs or your industries that they're not the same since COVID. I think nowhere is that more critically felt than on the front lines of our school system and on the front lines of our health and human services system. The needs are significant, and inflation is everywhere. It's not just at the gas pump and the grocery store. It's in the benefits that you have to supply to your employees. It's in the materials and the software licenses and all of the other things that you all have to purchase for everyone in the city, but that is required at the school level as well. I just wanted to come and speak to you as a parent who's really happy with the education that their kids received. And I encourage you to look past, frankly, the negative input that you've received tonight, because there's nowhere better to raise a family. I know many of you are doing that now. And if there's any gift that I can provide to the people who have done so much for my kids, it's to come here and speak in support of their teachers and their administrators. Because anytime you give a task to an administrator, ideally you're taking a task off the list of a teacher so that they can spend more time with my kid. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. My name's Eric Anderson, 38 Georges Terrace in Portsmouth. I've come before the City Council, as with others, for years on matters on the city budget increases that resident taxpayers have had to absorb. As you are aware, during your tenure, the total annual increases have been substantial. This year is no different, and with a recent large increase in property valuation, it is translated to most in higher tax bills and ever-increasing fiscal pressure on taxpayers to incur the cost with the administrative response of loss of services. I don't fully buy into that, but that's what's been stated. I've attended most of the recent work sessions and council meetings with budget discussions to recognize the only contention is with either the police or school budget. This budget is made up of many components and categories that receive no inquiry or challenge with regards to cost or increases and have a substantial effect on its total, but could have a quantitative result if adjusted to reduction. Former councilors Kennedy and Huda have been consistent and relentless in pointing out aspects that raise question for your consideration and knowledge, and have not yet received an answer or reply in any form. In opinion, that is inappropriate. They probably know and understand the budget document better than some councilors. In addition to this subject, I think there are many unknowns not fully recognized with reductions in federal and state funding and the downstream effects to cities and towns that will most likely fall upon taxpayers. Without malice, I've carefully watched each councilor during these public sessions on the budget, and with the exception of Mayor McEachran and this evening, Councilor Cook, I've seen nobody pick up a pen and write down anything of just noteworthy consideration. I don't know, and so with some consistency you've expressed your opinions on these budget matters through your personal lens and not those who elected you. You sit here where you sit to represent the residents and taxpayers of this city. I believe the mayor at the last council meeting asked for each councilor for considerations or adjustments to the budget no later than last Wednesday. And I'd be curious to know some of the responses received, although I do see it in the agenda that there's just a couple of comments from one of the councilors, Council Bagley. In reality, This $149 million budget, if you add the potential of the $40 million in bonding, and that's the potential, the total here is about $189 million for this year, closer to 190. That's the reality of this situation. It's late in the game, but with hope that at least some reductions could be considered. Other than that, it appears that any public comments or opinions are a necessary procedural formality with no qualitative result. Again, I appreciate your work. Again, thank you for this opportunity, and I hope your decision is in the best interest of the taxpayers of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Dr. McLaughlin.
Your Honor, I don't typically come to the podium in a public hearing, but there was a process issue that I wanted to speak to, and I wanted to make sure, I didn't know that I would have another opportunity to speak to it later, so I don't think you'll see me back in public hearing in the future at the podium, but I want to make sure that I spoke to it. I also don't often write anything. I usually speak from the cuff, but I wanted to make sure I hit this just right in a respectful way, both to you and to some of the employees who had some concerns for me. Good evening, counselors. I want to take this moment to speak to something that's come up in recent meetings, questions about the effectiveness of specific positions, particularly those held by a single individual. And I want to start by acknowledging that I, too, have struggled with this issue, and even in this particular budget season. Esther Kennedy at one of our meetings rose to say you need to be careful in the way in which you, Zach, and the board are talking about an individual position inhabited by an individual person. As we look closely at how we align our resources with the district priorities, I found myself asking difficult questions about individual roles. And it's part of being responsible with public funds, and I know that that's the spirit in which you raise these questions as well. That said, I've also seen how challenging it can be to keep the focus on the role itself, especially when a singular individual fills it. In public settings, those conversations can begin to resemble performance evaluation, and that's a line I think we need to be careful not to cross. And again, these are comments that Ms. Kennedy definitely sent in my direction during our process at the school, on the school side. It's not fair to the employee, and it's not the intent of the public forum, and I know that's not the intent of the council. We should absolutely scrutinize our investments, but in doing so, I encourage us to focus on the function, and I think for the most part that's what we have done throughout this process. What is the need? What need does the position address? What service would be lost if it were eliminated? How does it support our shared goals for students and families and the taxpayers? We have clear a clear and confidential process in place for evaluating individual performance. Those are the appropriate venues for this level of review, and by keeping our public conversations centered on the roles and responsibilities, not the people, we preserve both the integrity of our process and the dignity of our staff. So I thank you for your thoughtfulness and the care that you bring to the work. Please don't take this as a scolding. This is me trying to think about reflectively through our whole process. How do we all do this well? And I know we need to do it. We need to do it better as well. I just want to make sure I'm in a position where people who I am asking to do courageous things inside of the organization aren't put in a difficult public situation around their individual position. And I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McLaughlin.
Drew Hood at 280 South Street. So I'm looking at page 2 on your agenda, and there's no numbers there. There's blanks. So I take this as another opportunity to point something out to you that you may not have looked at. And I'll go to rolling stock first. So in rolling stock, under the Public Works silo, we are requesting vehicles and equipment for highway, $444,000, stormwater, $255,000, sewer, $495,000, water, $392,000, parking, $390,000. The total here is actually $2,321,000. So I would ask you to look at these and ask yourself, within the silos, can these be shared, and is this equipment really needed at this time? That's the first thing. The next thing I want to point out, and I know you guys don't study the budget book like I do, but in your general administrative section, there's an account called unanticipated expenses. And from last year, it went from $80,000 to $125,000. So I would ask you, with all the discussion tonight, is there an opportunity there to use some of this money for other expenses? The other thing I would question, and this is not accusatory, but it's been bugging me. In our public works areas, we overspent our budget by 36,850% on tools. So I would ask, why are we still buying those tools with legs? Can we do something to change this? I see it as another opportunity to save there and share. The last thing I'm going to talk to you about is to consider what is going to be requested of you at the next meeting for the bonding. All of this is expense, operating expense. The next part of it is the same thing. It's coming from the CIP that you authorized. Another $39 million, as was told to you previously. So please think about all of this stuff and all of the burden you are putting on the current taxpayers. And I know the numbers are blank. I still have hope. And please look at some of these other areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. Any other speakers for or against? No one on Zoom? Seeing that, closing the public hearing. First resolution is resolution number 7-2025, municipal fees.
Your Honor.
Councilor Bagley.
Can I ask a clarifying question just for the benefit of everybody listening? In order to pass the budget tonight, we need 6 votes in the affirmative.
Correct.
And if the budget does not pass, then we default to the budget proposed
that's in
tonight.
front of us. Yep.
So no vote unless there's a modification.
5
we're being
votes.
told
'Cause-
5.
yep.
I thought it was 6.
Yep, 5 votes.
Okay.
Yep.
Simple majority.
Yep, simple majority.
2/3 for the bond.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't know
Glad
that.
I'm wrong.
So we only need 5 votes.
Yeah.
Good news. If it doesn't pass, we're going to default to the budget before us anyway.
Correct.
Okay.
That's it? Only question? Okay.
Your Honor, I'm ready to make a motion to move to adopt Resolution 7-2025 municipal fees.
Second.
Any discussion on the municipal fees portion of the budget? Councilor Bagley.
Just because it's been talked about by some non-residents, there are some increases to the fees of the parking garage, particularly at Foundry for non-resident passes. If anybody's been parking there recently, the employee parking program's been a great success. More and more people are using it every month. We're running out of spaces, and there's a lot of development going on around there, so we're going to run out of spaces at some point. So the increase in fee, while it will add revenue, I think the real purpose there is to manage the inventory, as we have wait lists for both garages now for monthly passes. But the resident fee will stay the same.
Any other discussion? We'll have a roll call vote.
Yes, ma'am.
When you're ready.
Yep. Assistant Mayor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Tabor?
Yes.
Counselor Cook?
Yes.
Counselor Denton?
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock?
Yes.
Counselor Bagley?
Yes.
Counselor Moreau?
Yes.
Counselor Lombardi?
Yes.
Mayor McCackron?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Next up is resolution number 8-2025, general fund expenditures.
Your Honor, I move to adopt Resolution 8-2025, General Fund Expenditures.
Second.
Your Honor.
Discussion. Counselor Bagley.
I believe I motioned to suspend the rules and bring up 3 items under my name at this point. Is that the correct way to do it?
That'd be one of them. Yep.
I would motion to suspend the rules to bring up item D, or D under my name, items 2, 3, and 4.
Second.
All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Sorry, I was forgetting to suspend the rules.
All right, so I'll speak briefly to the 3 of them as a whole, and then I guess we'd go through each one independently. My objective with these motions was to not increase the total number for the city manager proposed budget, but to slightly reallocate funds in a way that I thought was most beneficial to our residents. The first item would be to move to set the police department budget to fiscal year 2026 at the same funding level as fiscal year 2025, and if I get a second, I'll explain my thought process there.
Second for conversation.
So the last number of years, the police budget has been set for, I believe, 70 positions. We've never really had the 70 positions filled. So every year we exceed the overtime number that is budgeted, but not the actual police budget. At the requested work session that we had, I believe, 2 weeks ago, a number of us had asked for the current overtime budget year to date because the numbers we were working with were from February. We did receive late Friday an email with updated numbers. I don't know if those have been published to the website. I don't think they're in the packets. I don't know if the residents have had a chance to read it, but I believe year to date, or year to May, we're about $454,000 over on the overtime budgeted number for the police. I don't think myself as a counselor, I have enough information to set the fiscal 26 budget at an increase because I still have a lot of questions about how we're doing the overtime. The reason I'm concerned about the overtime is we're trying to, at least in my opinion, develop a police force that is well compensated and doesn't have to work a lot of overtime. If every year we're calling on our officers to work a lot of overtime, we run the risk of having turnover on officers that want less overtime, but retaining only officers that want the overtime. And over time, we're going to have a police force that is made up of officers that want to work a lot of overtime. I'd rather see our officers work less and be compensated at a better wage. I think we need more chance to discuss this. Now, of note, in that letter that came from the police department, they did say those overtime costs will continue to be incurred until the officer. Wait, hang on. Sorry, I should have highlighted it. The department tracks the salary to overtime monthly to make sure the overtime overage doesn't exceed the salary savings and provides that information monthly to the commission. If the department got to the point where an overtime overage did exceed the salary savings, a supplemental appropriation request is possible. So while we are, if this were to pass, we'd be setting the budget tonight on the fiscal 25 numbers, the police department or the commission could come back and ask for a supplemental appropriation. If my other 2 motions were to pass, there would still be money remaining in the budget of, I think, about $130,000 that we could then appropriate towards overtime at a future date. But I wish we had had this information sooner so that we could make a more informed decision tonight.
Well, we can certainly talk about it. We have with us members of administration from the police department, Karen Senecal, as well as the chief. Happy to invite them up. I will say, in terms of the overtime, I'll say just a few comments on that. There's and this is maybe speaking if you're tuning in to Channel 22 for the first time, we'll talk about overtime just a little bit, and maybe the police department can fill in some of the things that I get wrong, because it is a little tricky for me to understand, as well as I think folks to understand at home. So if we look at the number of police officers that we have in terms of our staffing recommendations at 70, we then have people, if we're at 64 officers right now that are employed by the city of Portsmouth, we have officers that come in mandatorily to fulfill just our duties under that staffing guideline of 70. And so they are, I don't know, Chief's probably pretty nice about it, but forced to do overtime in order to meet our minimum staffing requirements of 70. If there are events, and there were a few this weekend, I saw police at Greek Fest, I saw them at Pride, I saw Rochelle at Eli's ribbon cutting. That was a comfort dog situation. I don't know if it was an overtime event. I doubt it. And there was one other one that I'm missing that I went to.
Community picnic.
Community picnic. Yep, that was another one. So there's events for all of those that can dig into another portion of overtime. Those are events outside of that. But just the 70 officers, and we haven't had a conversation about changing what our response times would be for the 70. And a portion of that overtime will go down if we get to 70. The portion that is the events in Portsmouth will not go down. As I understand it, seeing some nods around that. Even if we get to 70, there's going to still be overtime, but that overtime is then collected, money for, charged back. That goes into the general fund to the tune of about $340,000. Is that about right? And so that goes to all of us. What I've had conversations with some on the police commission, not all, and in conversations here, is recognizing that we're at 70 positions is the key, and we haven't discussed 70 positions as staffing suggestion, up to date on this council. I believe that's the correct number. I don't know if I speak for the council. I don't think I do, but I speak for myself when I believe 70 is the right number that delivers us the amount of proactive and reactive responses that we have. If that's the case, and you believe that to be true, as I do, then we have to talk about overtime and salaried positions. Right now, and I think this is a problem, and this is the problem that I've shared at the public, the work sessions, we kind of hide the overtime in the city of Portsmouth from a standpoint of paying for it. Not in terms of using it, but we use salary savings when those positions aren't filled to have that. But that puts us in a position where we don't actually have a conversation in the city of Portsmouth on the amount of overtime that our force is working. I think that makes it harder to have these conversations in the budget process, not easier. It's just what we have done. That's why I am comfortable keeping the positions at 70, having an appropriation, in the middle of the year if necessary. If Nathan tells us that there's money there and it's not necessary, then great, it comes on the back of the budget. But I feel as though keeping the positions at 70 and working to that as our staffing recommendation, whether or not we fund those positions or not, is going to make fiscal sense for Portsmouth, because we're going to reduce that overtime number. That's not the parades, it's not the events, it's literally staffing our force enough so that it actually responds and gives the care that we have come to expect. And so I will not support the level funding. I appreciate trying to find money. We'll try to find, if this doesn't fail and we have two more things, we'll have to try to find some money from somewhere else if this one fails. But didn't mean to get on a soapbox, should have passed the gavel. But Karen, anything that I missed on that? Okay. Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just have a question for Councilor Bagley, because I'm sure he's done these numbers. That $130,000 figure you gave, is that the differential between the last year's funding budget and the city manager's current budget proposal? Or?
No, and because I got these numbers from the police department late Friday, I didn't have a chance to really crunch them. I believe the fiscal 26 is about $330,000 more than fiscal 25. If you add up the two other motions I'm going to make, and then you subtract that 330 number, that's where come up with the 130. But this is rough back of the envelope math done on the weekend.
I don't have that on.
Thank you.
Is that, so the last year's budget was 14.2? 14.5, okay, and it goes to 14.9 in this, okay, so about, so 300 and change.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments, questions on level funding? And this is the motion to level fund the police on year over year from a fiscal 25 to fiscal 26. Councilor Tabor.
Yeah, I would oppose the motion. I think we all got the matrix study over the weekend, which is a well-done, in-depth look. There's recommendations in that, particularly for staffing up in dispatch. And I would be concerned about a level funding when we've got a story that's happening in dispatch that we've had a lot of turnover. We need to restructure in some ways. That's the recommendation. And that vital part of the operation needs to be stabilized. They also recommend another evidence technician. So a lot of information's hit us at the last minute, but I would not feel comfortable level funding because of the recommendations of the matrix study.
Any other comments, questions? Councilor Cook almost said something. So,
Say something.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. While I've already said, and I said this publicly at our last meeting, that I'm a no vote on the budget because it goes over the Social Security COLA, I'm not in favor of level funding from the prior year because I do know that we have salary increases that are driving increases, and we can't level fund without finding cuts to staffing. Councilor Tabor is absolutely right about challenges in dispatch and needing to hire more for dispatch. And my understanding from the chief is that we think we're there, that we've made those hires. So that's positive. And so level funding from last year would not, while that we were funded for those positions, that money was being used for overtime. And without at least, in my opinion, a 2.5% increase, which is what I have been lobbying for, because that's a Social Security COLA, I think we would be in trouble as far as funding positions.
All right. Sensing the temperature, we'll take a, all in favor?
The
Don't these have to be roll call or no?
Oh, on the Bagley amendment? I didn't think the amendments had to be roll call, but we'll do it. We'll roll call vote.
Okay. Assistant Mayor Kelly?
No.
Councilor Tabor?
No.
Councilor Cook?
No.
Councilor Denton?
No.
Councilor Blaylock?
No.
Councilor Bagley?
Yes.
Councilor Moreau?
No.
Councilor Lombardi?
No.
Mayor McCackron?
No.
Motion fails 8-1.
All right.
All right, Your Honor. Item number 3, I move to increase the school department budget by $153,000 above the city manager's recommended amount.
Second.
And I'll speak briefly to this. The school board, as we know, is asking for substantially more than that. I tried to hit upon a number that would, and I'm not going to say where they should spend it. That's a determination that they make. But I really feel like the middle school counselor position is essential. We probably are going to need some more paras. I'm hoping that number is low enough that it would get as many votes as there's needed to pass, and I wouldn't be opposed if somebody wanted to increase it.
Thanks, Councilor Bagley. Councilor Blaylock.
Thank you, Your Honor. I won't be supporting this, but I'll just state I think we have great teachers, and I think we should be empowering them. I've heard from a lot of school parents. I've heard from a lot of individuals. They've shared their concerns. These are examples, but they cause me to question if there's been a deeper review of opportunities and efficiencies within the school department. I mean, the strong example that I brought up in our work session of the IXL program. The feedback I've been getting is that it hasn't been helping. The staff is frustrated. The students are frustrated. And it's just kind of being imposed on them. When I asked about it in our work session, the response I've given from the superintendent is that it's still being explored to determine if it's the most effective method to support students. So to me, that kind of sounds like we're changing the target, we're experimenting with the current students. We're not really sure. There's no numbers. It's still being explored, but I know there's teachers that are, being told to do it. We have teachers like Mr. Toby Schaff at the high school. He's an institution. I was fortunate enough to have him as a teacher. He's a better math teacher than most of my professors at Bates College. But we should be giving him and the other math teachers, we should be empowering them and giving them the opportunity to correct how they think should better improve these students and their math scores. I don't know. I question the due diligence that's been done to maximize the efficiencies and talent across all departments. This is what I see, so I question it. But I'll be supporting the city manager's recommended budget, but no more. And just to state that, this year it's a tough year. We don't have the money this year, so the money isn't there. A lot of residents' tax bills have gone up, 100 to 200%. So already before we vote on anything tonight.
Hey, Councilor Bullock, any other comments? Say a few words. I'll pass the gavel this time because I might talk longer. Sorry.
That's okay.
I couldn't help but I don't always do a good job. I get the paper, don't always read the paper, and at least on time. And so I was struck by the superintendent's words there from a moral standpoint and investing in our schools. I would say, as much as anybody, about to reap the benefits of the investments that many people have made over the last, I don't know, forever, I guess. But I got a girl in third grade, or going into third grade, and one more just so close to not paying for preschool. But I think where I come down differently than some of these arguments is that I very much believe in education, the transformation that it makes in lives. I also recognize that if we love something, we have to do as best we can to make sure that it is efficient as possible. There are many people that question government at any turn that we have. And when we think about the expenditures that we will incur this year when it comes to education, a lot of them, the savings that we had from the 11 early retirements, 6 are back in terms of getting teachers back into the classrooms. Some of them, like the maintenance, I guess, supervision role, I still maintain that we got to get this into DPW and we got to align on that to get more efficiencies. The fact that there are 3 pairs expected to come in, we had 2 pairs last year that were made into the back of the budget, which tells me that there are ways to make that happen. And when we don't, when we future load those, it takes away a little bit of the administrative gloss there. I guess I struggle with some of the arguments around not losing, this budget isn't going to lose teachers. We've lost teachers through early retirement. We're talking about adding positions. And I think we're at an inflection point in this, and I question some of the, not teachers or assignments or, I think Portsmouth schools are great. Every kid that I've come out, that I've talked to, anytime you go to a graduation, you're just wowed by the experience that these kids have by 17, 18 years old. And you're like, I hope to get that by 45, you know, so it's quite something, and we should all be incredibly proud of that. What I am concerned about is the changes in the state landscape that are going to bring a magnifying glass even more on the conversations that we have. You know, SWEPT is constitutional, but it's up to the legislature whether or not they're going to retain those funds, how they're going to distribute those funds. Those are going to be big challenges ahead. We have voucher programs, as Roy, where's Roy? He's gone now, but pointed out in terms of us already, you know, delivering special education funds to private schools. Now we're also delivering $5,000 per student, you know, in the state of New Hampshire with money that we don't have. There's a lot of headwinds. And so when I look at this budget, in addition to the headwinds that we have, it's hard to think about this as a grow phase. This seems like a run phase to me. And I ask, I guess there's a couple of things that I hope that we could have seen. One was the paras be on the back of the budget. Two, from it was compelling argument that we need a case administrator, and I think it was, and we're escaping her name in terms of the, anytime there's an administrator, it takes the load off of a teacher, but same for the health worker or the case workers, or sorry, the counselors. I would have loved to see, instead of an additional position rehired in that, to make one of those positions, you know, the leader of that department, and then seeing more efficiencies that we were going to gain, you know, from that, and then see how we're going to deploy resources more effectively. Because I guess the biggest concern that I have when it comes to education now is around mental health. And I am not, I can't help but think that we are, two things, like one, skate park came up to me, you know, like Ryan was talking about his son, Noah's son, Tiernan's good friend. I promise I got a point here. Would go to the skate park every morning before school and skate. That was a mental health, you know, he didn't call it a mental health thing, but saw it as a way to improve, you know, his outlook and his performance in school, and it worked. Second thing that I saw outside of the school department, although there was members of the school department there, was Eli George creating an opportunity at Goslings Meadow to invest in an after-school program, kind of born out of MC3, became B3 basketball, got a court built, really impressive. Probably has a direct impact on mental health. So when we're talking about mental health as much as we are, I still feel like it's happening in a silo in the school department for our students, when we should be talking about it much more collaboratively, because I can't help but think that we are putting Band-Aids instead of, like, you know, stopping the wound there from happening, and there needs to be more. So I would be, if there was a motion to meet the slight increase for Councillor Bagley's based on a further reduction in the other part, I would entertain that. But at the moment, there is, and I don't mean to say that there's the situation is dire, but there's a lot going on in the world. There's a revaluation that we went through. The budget on the numbers, and I know we threw a lot of numbers out. The new reality is about a % increase going forward for any, you know, school budget is not going to out of districts, it's going to teachers' salaries. Again, that's an investment that we all think is worthwhile. We made that, you know, agreement when we put the floor of a COLA at 3%. That's above the Social Security index, but we invested in our teachers and we followed the rolling COLA that we have. That means other things can't be invested in if we're going to try to keep the budget on a glide path that is not going to come up at 5 or 6%, and all in, school department's budget is 5.7% inclusive of rolling COLA, out of districts, and new additions outside of what we have. So that's my piece, I guess, for the moment. If we have an amendment to take something else from outside, I consider it.
Councillor Bagley?
Your Honor, I would consider your amendment, but I'm not entirely sure what exactly you're asking for. A different number?
Well, we didn't. So, in terms of level funding any of this, Councillor Bagley, we didn't make it because
My first one failed.
Yeah, probably, if I were to order these, I would probably maybe put the spending before the cuts, but the cuts failed, and so if there's a motion from the council to support something, more aggressive than this, otherwise, I have the faith and confidence in this budget from the city manager, and the school department is going to continue to deliver excellent services, and I know for the next year we'll plan towards having more investments in those interventions that we believe will have an impact, and we'll have another year of data to study those, and a special director in place to speak to those as well. A special education director. Councilor Cook? Oh, sorry, I'm not.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I've asked a lot of questions about the school budget over the course of our budget discussions. And part of the reason that I've been asking all of those questions is that when I look at the school's budget, I know that the costs have been increasing significantly since COVID. And I know that that's the case across the board. We saw significant increases post-COVID. And unfortunately, a lot of the provisions that we put in place to deal with COVID that were funded by the federal government, as our school board chair alluded to, are no longer funded by the federal government. If we want to continue to provide those services, unfortunately, that means we have to make hard choices. And I know what it's like from the perspective of being the daughter of a superintendent when you come into a new district that has to make really tough choices. And we have a superintendent that's been here that's new, who came in just a few years ago and has had to make really tough decisions post-COVID. And what I see at the schools is some challenges around making those hard calls. And while I really appreciate some of the answers that we finally received in the packet to my questions that I'd asked, what I see is that we're trying to get somewhere, but they're going to be even harder choices that we have to make because the budget can't continue to grow exponentially. SAU 16, which is the Exeter School District, had similar challenges with their budget and growth of the budget, especially around out-of-district placements. The school board committed with the administration to spend 3 years to work really hard to bring those out-of-district placements back in district. So they found a way to cut the cost because they saw that exponential growth in out-of-district placements. And so what I have been really trying to ask this whole time is trying to get the superintendent and the school board to start thinking about where we can find those efficiencies. If SAU 16 can do it, then so can we. So we have to start thinking differently about how we save money, where we can find ways. And it's not necessarily hiring more, but shifting roles. And so that's where I've been looking for more emphasis on shifting roles and less emphasis on hiring more individuals to solve our challenges, because we do have declining enrollment. So it's just not sustainable to continue to hire more individuals to fix challenges we have, when what we should be thinking about is how do we shift roles, how do we retrain people that we have currently on staff. And I know that those are really challenging things to do, especially for a new superintendent. Because when you come into that role, you're already dealing with the system set up the way it was, a system that went through a crisis. And so you're trying to recover from crisis. So I understand those challenges, but I haven't seen enough movement. And that's why I haven't been very supportive of more significant increases to the budget at this stage, because I want to see more effort at trying to make those shifts that we need to make, because it's not just that it's not sustainable this year. If we look at the current budget and we adopt the proposed school board budget and then we move forward from there, those increases are so exponential that it's going to drive the city budget so much higher. Our taxpayers are going to object. And that's what I think Mayor McEachern was alluding to, is that we have to be really smart when we're spending taxpayer dollars, and we have to ask those tough questions, and we have to be extremely critical, and so that we guarantee to our taxpayers that they're getting the best the best services for the most efficient spending that we can provide. And so that's my big concern, is that I don't want people to think that we're not working really hard to find those efficiencies. And so that's all I'm asking. I'm asking for that effort.
Any more? Councilor Bagley?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm not on the school board. I didn't run for school board. I don't want to do their job. I look at my job as a fiscal one, but I can speak as a parent of a child who went through the entire school system and graduated this past year. I knew her friends as well, and I think we cannot undervalue the value of our school system. And I've talked, my father's birthday is today, and he was a math teacher. He passed away a couple years ago. He would have been 85 today. And my mother was also a high school teacher. And the challenges that they faced were similar to the ones that we face today, but there were different resources to deal with them today than we have now. Schools are not just places of learning. They're where communities are built. They're where a lot of kids get their meals. That's where they find their mentors that they may not have at home. Our schools, our teachers are asked to do far more than they ever were in the past. The budget is always going to be increasing in good school systems. I don't think this is where we should be looking for efficiencies. I can't help but reflect that we're talking about $153,000. And if the parking amendment passes later, we'll be a council that this year has waived over $1 million in fees. And I don't know that waiving $1 million in fees for housing, why important, or parking, why, in my opinion, much less important, should take priority over having the excellent school system. And I'll reiterate it again. My wife and I, we moved to Portsmouth specifically because of the schools. That was the number one reason we moved here. We felt it was very important for our daughter to grow up here because of the school systems. Now, albeit the rest of the community is fantastic as well, but the schools are why we made our choice. And I think we might be underestimating the impact that the pandemic had on the kids. There are still kids in school today, and there will be for a number of years, that didn't get the development most of us had because of the 2 or 3 years that the pandemic caused in social disruption, especially for those kids that were their first few years of their lives, who are now, I think, in the late elementary school, middle school. When you should be socializing, they weren't able to because of the health situation that we were faced with. Our schools are going to have a tougher job than they've ever had before for these next few years, and I think we need to give them as many resources as we possibly can.
Any more discussion? Your Honor.
Say one more thing. There was one other point in the article that Dr. McLaughlin made, and that was for a specific position. That one specific position was the Portsmouth Middle School. What's the actual title of that special education? Behavioral program. What people that came up in Portsmouth would remember as the kids program, something similar to that effect. And the benefit was twofold. One, those individuals would have the type of learning and focus, and then two, from another standpoint, and hopefully, intervene when areas of opportunity to do so was still present before high school, and to keep them within the district if that was certainly an issue that was coming up. That was one that struck me. The other was the ability to focus the attention on that cohort of individuals, freeing up the teachers of the other classrooms to better focus on the kids that did not need that attention. That seemed like a win, and well thought out from a standpoint of being able to argue. The others, it's not that they're not good. It's that it was harder to understand the direct benefit without the data to support that in the presentations. Continue to ask for the numbers for the paraeducators that we had assigned to IEPs from other SAU 50 districts. Could not really get those, and we need to align on those in the future to be able to have a better chargeback. and better understanding for those other districts to understand the true cost of education here. That's something that I hope that the school board takes up in the future. But I don't want to be in the position, we have no line item in control. And as school board member Maddow, I don't know what he eloquently stated that it's not our job to tell them how to do their job, and that's right, and that's in the charter in terms of line items. So there were positions that were effectively argued for in terms of our position as a council, at least from my position. That's the one that that stood out, and you know, again, if there's a adjustment that would be made from the budget to support that. That's something that I could support, but it's harder to understand the things that we don't have as much data on, even though they might as well be good. There could be better ways to spend that money on, you know, more after-school programs, you know, expanding peak, you know, working into, you know, figuring out how MC3 could come back in a different form. I know there's federal funds around that that limit it, but there's a lot of government that could be missed more, I think, and is more definite as a need. But the kids program or the PMS program did stand out as one that was well articulated and one that I think could be supported if we went to look at the rolling fund or rolling stock, you know, or something along those lines. Councilor Bagley.
I did ask a while back for the costs of that, the PMS behavioral program teacher, and the cost before the recent contract adjustment was $94,637. So if I would be willing to amend my motion to be $100,000 instead of.
If I can clarify, I believe the all-in number benefits. All the other numbers is 146,000. So it's not just the 94 for the position itself,
Insurance.
Counselor.
Yeah. Taxes.
All in, as fully budgeted, would be 146,000.
And that's for PMS behavioral program teacher versus district director of counseling.
I believe so, but I'm looking for clarification from Brian or staff. So which number are you looking for? Sorry?
I think the mayor's looking for the middle school.
They're both at the middle school.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the number at the 153, if there's a, you know, again, you know, we have a motion on the floor. It seems like it's in the
minority at the moment.
The ballpark. I do think that, again, would want to make sure that there was amendments elsewhere in the budget.
Councilor Lombardi.
Thank you. I think we've spent a lot of time and effort in giving our teachers salary improvements, and I think that's a good way to increase the benefit of the schools. I would like to see more creativity in how they're operating. I know when my kids went to Don Darrow, they were in a classroom called the Aries Classroom. Mayor, you might remember that. You weren't at Don Darrow, but it was a very creative classroom that tended to a lot of the students' needs outside of just the academics. It also had very good academics. I would like to see more creative thinking from the school board and the administration on the budget process and on how to solve some of these problems or perceived problems that are in front of us. I have trouble just, you know, throwing another position into the mix. I guess I would rather see something more like what Councilor Cook suggests, is that we look at our resources and how to reevaluate our resources and go from there. So although I really appreciated the superintendent's letter and description, I thought it was very compelling, but I'm struggling with where to take money to support that, and where would that come from? So as it stands now, I would probably vote against this item.
Okay. Any more discussion? If not, then we will do a roll call vote on the Councilor Bagley's motion.
Yep. So, Mayor, you will vote first, okay? Mayor McCachran?
Yes.
Okay. Counselor Tabor?
Yes.
Counselor Cook?
No.
Counselor Denton?
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock?
No.
Counselor Bagley?
Yes.
Counselor Moreau?
No.
Counselor Lombardi?
No.
Assistant Mayor Kelly?
No.
Motion fails on a 4-5 vote. Pass that back. Let's get it back.
All right, FY26 budget, move to increase the fire department budget by $112,000 above the city manager's recommended amount.
Your Honor, if I get a second, I'll speak briefly to this.
Second for conversation.
The fire department, as we all know, also is our ambulance and medical response department. And they bring in, I believe, over $1 million a year in revenues through the ambulatory services. What we could have with this is not quite a full year funded of a training position. I have a feeling that I know where the vote's going to go on this, so I won't speak any further to it. Unless, of course, anybody has questions.
Any further questions? Any questions at all? Councilor Moreau.
I believe at one point we had asked whether or not, instead of hiring a person to do the job for this, whether or not it would be less money to contract it out, but I don't remember if we ever actually got those numbers back on that question, or the question answered. It was from a work session. I was just curious.
Do we get out? Don't know that we know the answer, but the chief is here. I don't know if the chief wants to respond.
Seeing,
Here he comes. These chairs are brutal.
Thank you. So, in an effort to answer the question that was asked that night as to whether or not we could do it cheaper, we ran some numbers on some low-end projections and some high-end projections, and this would save us money instead of contracting it out, especially in a couple of the key areas that we talked about.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Any further conversation? All right, we'll have a roll call vote.
Assistant Mayor Kelly?
No.
Counselor Tabor?
No.
Counselor Cook?
No.
Counselor Denton?
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock?
No.
Counselor Bagley?
Yes.
Counselor Moreau?
No.
Counselor Lombardi?
No.
Mayor McCachran?
No.
Motion fails. 2 in favor, 7 opposed.
And we are back to the general government expenditures. Any further discussion? We'll have a roll call vote.
Okay. Just going to write down resolution number. Eight. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Assistant Mayor Kelly?
Yes.
Okay. Counselor Tabor?
Yes.
Counselor Cook?
No.
Counselor Denton?
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock?
Yes.
Council Bagley,
No.
Council Moreau,
Yes.
Council Lombardi,
Yes.
Mayor McCachran.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-2. Resolution 8 passes with a total of $149,894,940.
Kelly?
You're welcome.
Next up, water fund, resolution number 9, 2025, water fund expenditures.
Your Honor, I move to adopt Resolution Number 9, 2025, Water Fund Expenditures.
Second.
Sorry.
Oh, second. Sorry.
Any discussion? Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to remind the public that the water fund expenditures and sewer fund expenditures do not come out of your tax rate. So those funds are funded separately in your water and sewer rates.
Kelly, can we have a roll call vote?
Yes, Mayor. Assistant Mayor Kelly,
Yes.
Councilor Tabor,
Yes.
Council Cook,
Yes.
Councilor Denton,
Yes.
Council Blaylock,
Yes.
Councilor Bagley,
Yes.
Council Moreau,
Yes.
Council Lombardi,
Yes.
Mayor McCachran,
Yes.
unanimous. Resolution number 9 passes.
Next up, resolution number 10-2025, sewer fund expenditures.
Your Honor, I move to adopt Resolution 10, 2025, sewer fund expenditures.
Second.
Any discussion? Kelly, can we have a roll call vote?
Yes, Mayor. Assistant Mayor Kelly,
Yes.
Councilor Tabor,
Yes.
Council Cook,
Yes.
Councilor Denton,
Yes.
Council Blaylock,
Yes.
Council Bagley,
Yes.
Council Moreau,
Yes.
Council Lombardi,
Yes.
Mayor McCachran.
Yes.
Resolution number 10 passes unanimously.
Your Honor, I would move to adopt resolution of number 11, 2025, special revenues, debt service fund, Portsmouth Housing Endowment Trust, and committed fund balances.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing no further discussion, Kelly, will you please take a roll call vote?
Yes, Mayor. Assistant Mayor Kelly,
Yes.
Councilor Tabor,
Yes.
Council Cook,
Yes.
Councilor Denton,
Yes.
Council Blaylock,
Yes.
Council Bagley,
Yes.
Council Moreau,
Yes.
Council Lombardi,
Yes.
Mayor McCachran.
Yes.
Resolution number 11 passes unanimously.
Mayor, I move to adopt Resolution 12-2025, investment policy.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Kelly,
I will.
will you please take the roll?
Yes, Mayor. Assistant Mayor Kelly,
Yes.
Councilor Tabor,
Yes.
Councilor Cook,
Yes.
Councilor Denton,
Yes.
Council Blaylock,
Yes.
Council Bagley,
Yes.
Council Moreau,
Yes.
Council Lombardi,
Yes.
Mayor McCachran.
Yes.
Resolution number 12 passes unanimously.
Thank you, Kelly. We will take a 5-minute recess.
Your Honor, before we do that, I would like to acknowledge that this is the 30th and final budget for Andrew Pergel, our Deputy
way.
Finance Director. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you also to the staff.
Your Honor, I'd also like to commend the city manager. This was a tough budget. She did a great job, and it's also her birthday, so happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Well, we got it done.
And that wasn't on TV. Good, good, good.
Welcome back. It's always a little jarring there when you're not looking for it.
Empty chamber.
We have city manager's items which require action.
I have 3 items, Your Honor. The first one is a request for a license for a Coast Guard vessel for temporary dockage this summer season at Prescott Park. As folks will recall, in January of 2024, there was a severe winter storm which damaged the boathouse at the Coast Guard station at Portsmouth Harbor in Newcastle, and the vessel needs temporary home while the boathouse is getting repairs. This vessel will not be used for commercial purposes. It will be used expressly for marine safety patrols. We then followed up to ask if they could help enforce the no-wake zone area, and they said they would. And the idea is that this agreement will terminate by the end of the season on October 1st of this year.
Your Honor, I move that the city manager be authorized to execute and accept a license in the form similar to the attached and waive the dock fees except for electricity cost for the Coast Guard vessel to berth at Prescott Park dock.
Second.
Councilor Moreau.
What would be the fees that we would gain if somebody was actually paying for this space? Do we know?
Fabulous question that I
Based
do not.
on linear foot, I don't know how big is the boat?
31 feet.
31 feet.
That part I remember.
Help, I let all the budget people go away.
So it's got a calculator on it.
amount for you.
Well, what do we charge per foot?
I don't think she has it in her
It's the
memo.
same as the,
Jane, we don't know the answer to that, do we? If you want, I can get that. We can come back to this if you want.
Yeah, I'm just curious because, well, one, I feel like the federal government probably has the funds to pay us. So if we're losing a ton of money by waiving the fees, I guess I'm a little bit bothered by that.
it's not a ton of money.
It's not. And it definitely expires at the end and they cannot like automatically renew it or keep the boat there. I'm just worried that they're going to like stay and never leave. And
Well, this agreement would terminate October 1st. If for some reason the repairs weren't made by then, they'd have to make another request of council.
I saw Councilor Cook when I looked over there before, but Councilor Bagley seems more eager. Councilor Bagley.
I normally don't like to see us waive fees, but I love the idea of having a Coast Guard cutter right by Prescott Park to
I don't
save
think it's
people if they fall in the water, so, or whatever type boat it is.
Not a cutter, cutter a little bigger.
Yeah, it's a little bigger.
For that.
Councilor Cook.
Did they have an alternative location that they
That's
considered?
the thing. They don't, and that's why they came to us. It's a particular size boat, and this gives them enough proximity to where they would ideally be at their own home berth, if you will.
Any other questions? I think for the concerns that I have were not the monetary. I'm happy to, I think from a city of Portsmouth, provide a home for the Coast Guard. We are a military town founded by men and women that moved here in many ways to that signed up to defend, whether or not they came to Newcastle at that station, Pease, or the Navy Yard. We're the beneficiary of that, so it's great to be able to give back in that component. Attorney Farini did reach out to see whether or not they were able to, take action against the no-wake zone. And while it is disappointing to have one less slip to put into the municipal lottery, a lottery that, I will never enter until I'm off the council, but it is, I think, will be a net benefit to not only the boaters that are boating there, fishers, as well as the safety of that region. To have that coming right out of there, enforcing the no-wake zone that exists, I think will be a benefit to our community that I think we should be proud to help with at this time.
Your Honor, thanks to Peter Ice saving the day, we believe the estimate of the fee waiver value is about $4,200.
okay, that makes me feel slightly better. It's not like 42,000.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. While normally I would object to the federal government not paying the fee, given that they definitely have the funds to pay the fee, I know that the budget cuts that all departments, including the Coast Guard, have experienced due to no fault of their own, probably puts them in a difficult position, and I think we should retain as many federal government services as we possibly can at a very minimal cost. So,
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. Item number 2 is a request for an agreement to give another 6-month extension for consideration for the parking lot usage and maintenance agreement with the St. John's Masonic Association, Inc. As council is aware, we have the benefit and have had the benefit for some time for 61 free parking spaces in their lot at the corner of Middle and Miller. 14 of those spaces in the lot are reserved for the exclusive use of the lodge. And the reason for the 6 months extension is we wanted to make sure we could come to a mutually beneficial resolution, which could also take into consideration the findings of the parking utilization study and recommendations. So to get us through to the next 6 months, we have adjusted the fee slightly. We have created 14 additional spaces that the city may use. And it also allows the lodge the provision of 31 spaces reserved for their regular meetings on Monday and Wednesday evenings. So we will work with them on signage and appropriate enforcement.
Your Honor, I move that the city manager be authorized to negotiate and enter into parking lot usage maintenance agreement with St. John's in the form similar to the attached.
Second.
Any questions? And you said St. John's Masonic
Yes.
Association?
Yes.
I mean, Councilor Bagler, you did.
I think I left off the Masonic Association.
That's all right.
So we do have a different parking agreement, I think.
We do, yeah. Any other questions, comments?
Just says St. John's, that's why.
Your Honor, great news on the additional parking spaces.
Always good news.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
My third and final item tonight is a request for an additional amendment to our lease with the Players Ring. The current extension for their lease runs out at the end of this month, and what we are trying to do is negotiate a new long-term lease because they're a great tenant. What we're trying to figure out is what their schedule of capital improvements might be to the facility, and those negotiations have to take into account the work that will be done from an infrastructure and building perspective associated with the implementation of the master plan for Prescott Park. So we are both trying to figure out what that means to both parties. They've been amenable and supportive of our request for a 1-year extension in order to figure that out. So we are appreciative of their consideration.
Your Honor, I move to negotiate and enter into lease amendment 4 with the Players Ring in a form similar to the attached.
Second.
Any discussion? Appreciate all the improvements. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
All right, we're on to consent agenda.
Your Honor, I move to adopt the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And I know that the governance is working on something from a signage standpoint. This,
Your Honor, we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there.
next up, email correspondence.
I move to accept and place on file.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, the memorandum from School Superintendent McLaughlin regarding budget work session updates.
Your Honor, I move to accept and place on file.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, a letter from the Gray family, property owners of 126 Bridge Street regarding zoning change from CD5 to CD4 or CD4-1 or CD4W.
Your Honor, I move to refer correspondence to the planning department.
Second.
Any discussion?
Your Honor.
Councilor Bagler.
I'm just a little confused as to why we're referring to this planning department, because isn't the council taking it up? Or
So we are taking it up at a public hearing at the second reading of the proposed ordinance changes. I think the thought is to refer to the planning department so that there will be input that can given to us at the second reading of this. We are not able to take action on this as it stands, even if we would like to at this moment. And I have no idea what the council wants to do to for or against. But because of the notice period, Again, given the fact that it is a zoning change that could be challenged, we need to make sure that we follow the notice periods, even if that means a further delay of second reading if a change were to be made. Is that?
So
That's
I guess
accurate.
the planning department will take it up before the next, the
Yeah, they'll
July
take a look
meeting.
at it, to read the letter, respond to questions that we will have, maybe at the
July
council,
14th.
the July 14th council meeting.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't know why, it's the hardest thing for me to remember, July 14th is the council meeting. I just want it to be the
Bastille Day.
17th.
There you go.
All right. So we have the motion, right? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Letter from Kevin Wentworth on behalf of Portsmouth Serious Summer League to allow the league's banners to be hung for the duration of their basketball season at South Playground.
Your Honor, I move to refer to the city manager with authority to act.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Request from Karen Parker for a license to install drainage pipe on city property adjacent to 86 Haven Road.
Your Honor, I move to refer to the Legal Department and Public Works Department for a report back.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Letter from Sean Menard, Seacoast Eat Local, requesting an amendment to the current agreement to allow additional temporary signage promoting the Portsmouth Farmers Market.
Your Honor, I move to refer to the city manager with authority to act.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? On to the council agendas, considerations for appointments not to be voted yet. Reappointment of Larry Booz, Margot Doring, and Martin Ryan, and Regan Rudig to the HDC, and the reappointment of Robin Pickering to the Portsmouth Housing Authority. Appointments to be voted. We have Susan B. Strauss to the HDC, and the appointment of Joy Kurth to the HDC.
Your Honor, I move to appoint Joy Kurth as a regular member and Susan B. Strauss as an alternate member to the Historic District Commission.
Second.
Okay.
Any discussion? Thank you for the service you're willing to give, and look forward to seeing you on the dais. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next on to the city council members, Assistant Mayor Kelly and Councilor Tabor.
Okay. Thanks, Your Honor. The Housing Committee was tasked with looking at the barriers to increasing our housing supply, particularly affordable housing. And as you saw in the packet, we came back with 5 areas for further work. Some are short-term, some are long-term. Right away, the planning board is taking up making parking a part of site review as opposed to going by the extensive table that now exists. Maybe Councilor Moreau can help me explain this, but right now, doing a project with 3 or more units often requires getting parking variances, and we're hearing that the parking restrictions are one of the main barriers to increasing our housing supply. So this simplifies it, makes it part of the site review process.
Can I add a little bit more to that?
Please.
Basically, anything that's more than 2 units, so 3 units and above, the parking regulations will be taken out of the zoning ordinance and put into site plan review regulations. Therefore, it's not an extra application for a conditional use permit, or, that's extra work, that's extra cost, that's extra everything. So if we combine it, then it gives the planning board a little bit more flexibility to really look at how the market can handle the parking, and to really have some flexibility to work with properties that might need more parking and properties that might not need to require so much parking. So we're trying to look at all the different aspects of that to try to streamline the process.
Right. So for example, if you have a building that has commercial on the lower floor and housing on the next floor, the commercial parking use ends at 5 o'clock, but the residential goes right in. So you could logically get by with a fewer number of parking spaces, but That's difficult for us to do with the current regulations and would not be difficult with these changes. We looked at the dimensional requirements, and you might have noticed that we had a table looking at all of our residential districts, and in some, the majority of the lots are non-conforming, which means if someone wants to rebuild there, it would require variance. So that's a master plan item that will take a long time, but a deeper study of all of our dimensional requirements, the actual getting them to confirm more to the actual size and frontage would allow more infill development. Map changes, we had great success turning several hundred acres into gateway zoning. We took a surplus of commercial and industrial land and opened it up for mixed use, including housing. So the committee identified 15 more parcels representing 39 acres that could be turned into mixed use gateway zoning, and there's probably more. We can look at a lot of the industrial areas that, you know, are hangovers from maybe 15, 20 years ago. Fourth, we have an RKG study as part of our Housing Champion Award, and RKG is going to look at incentives versus a developer's cost by different segment of the city geographically, and really give us a recommendation on how to make it successful to include 10% affordable units. And on July 11th, RKG is going to have public input on possible zoning changes, and they'll have ideas that they'd like to get input on. And lastly, this sparked some good discussion. Use number 1.60, which is converting older houses that were once single-family homes to have 3 to 6 units. We called it the Islington Street example. You've got all those old Victorians that now have multiple units in it, and that could be the easiest way to create more supply with our existing older buildings. The problem is it's really geographically restricted, so we can take another look at that and see if we can expand that into a lot of areas. Lastly, we look at wetlands relief. One of the committee members was on the council when the wetland buffer was increased from 75 feet to 100 feet. He brought that up for consideration, and it could possibly help, but the committee didn't feel they should recommend that. So that was a quick summary of what we found. And then we also, you know, expanding our housing supply presumes that somebody's going to build houses. So we talked to the people who build housing. We asked 3 developers about the barriers they saw, especially focused on middle-income housing. Parking relief came up right away. And second, in the downtown, reducing the allowable size per unit down to 600 square feet, even as low as 300 square feet. That'd make the conversion of office buildings an economic opportunity, and that would be housing that's intrinsically profitable without any subsidies or set-asides. The third, parking garage, would be an essential element of any expansion of housing supply downtown. And another idea that really sparked some interest, we talked about a 1% loan fund. In the Upper Valley and Lebanon and Hanover, the businesses and the banks teamed up to create a pool of money. They loan that at low interest for affordable housing projects. They've created about 250 units up there. The businesses get housing for their workers. The banks get community reinvestment tax credits. So we are going to go out and talk to some of our local bankers. We have talked to Service Credit. We'll talk to a few others. And lastly, all the folks we talked to said land in Portsmouth is scarce and precious, and it's a question of how to use it wisely. And they opened our eyes about our height restrictions. I don't think there's an appetite in the downtown, the historic downtown, to go much higher in number of stories. But there could be areas like Commerce Way or behind Water Country. The economics they explained to us of 8 to 10-story buildings with elevators and steel really starts to work to make potentially middle-income rentals, and that's not legal to do right now. So, as they said, height can be your friend, and long-term, that's probably where we're headed. But the trick is to find some places in the city that's feasible and practical and acceptable to the community at large. So those were off the top some of the results that we got. It was a good question to ask. There's a lot more work to do on it, but hopefully that's some material for the master plan.
Thanks to the committee.
Did I miss anything, councilors?
No, there's a question.
Oh, Councilor Cook.
No, I just wanted to say thank you so much to the committee for the really hard work at looking at these potential options that we have. I also wanted to ask that the committee consider some things that are maybe a little bit out of comfort zone currently. That things like conversions of single family residential neighborhoods to general residence, potentially, to allow for more development of multifamily housing in areas where we haven't had it in the past, and also completely waiving parking requirements in some single-family residential neighborhoods that have ample street parking. There are benefits to that maybe we haven't talked about due to traffic calming. You know, I think about neighborhoods like Elwyn Park, where people complain about traffic and people speeding, but there's plenty of room on the street for parking, yet we still have parking requirements. So someone can't build an ADU because they don't have that extra parking spot. You know, maybe looking at waiving parking or creating a new residential zone where parking requirements are waived. I love the idea of conversion, single-family conversions, because I live in one of those neighborhoods that has a lot of those and has that mixed housing. So I think maybe we need to be looking at not just reducing lot size, which I think is really an encouraging process to look at, but also considering elimination sometimes of those requirements, especially in zones that are generally non-conforming. So I really appreciated the data that was presented from the committee that showed the number of the percentage of non-conforming lots within our zones. It gives you an idea of just how our zoning has evolved over time, but not evolved to really reflect what neighborhoods actually look like. So, and how can we further adjust that?
And we did have one member of the committee who said there should be no parking minimums.
If I can add to
Councilor
that. One of the conversations we had around the general residence districts, because there's 3 of them, and single family districts, because there's 2 of them, is not only trying to possibly look at what would make most of these properties more non-conforming and less non-conformity, but streamlining and getting rid of some of them. Maybe we don't need 2 of one. Maybe we don't need 3 of the other. Let's really start to take a look at what's there, and I think that's why it makes a really great conversation around the master planning process.
Councilor Moreau, any other comments?
Yeah, one thing I would, just to reflect the conversation of the committee, we have younger members who always push us. And some of our older members will say, oh, the neighborhoods might not like that. And our younger members say, we're going to have to allow some discomfort if we're going to increase density. We're going to have to, as a city, grapple with that. The alternative is that older homeowners rule the roost, and that's not fair. It's not fair to our younger families and who want to be able to afford to live here.
Thank you to the committee, and if there's one thing I would add as you look at different neighborhoods, you talk about the historic downtown. I think there's a lot of sentimentality when it comes to that, and rightly so, economic driver. There's also significant infrastructure challenges in the downtown versus other areas. So as we think of areas to allow for larger buildings and more development, to be aligning those to where the resources, as it goes through TAC, is going to be, enabled, from a infrastructure standpoint, predominantly. There's a lot of conversation always about traffic. It's usually commuters, at least in my experience, people moving through Portsmouth, at least on the Cade Street, Hodgson Way connector. But apartments do have some impact on that too. So taking into account, especially the infrastructure, I think will go a long way in terms of being able to answer the question, can we support that? Yes, we have the stat. We can flush every toilet at once in Portsmouth if we'd like to, at the same time, and be okay. It's usually about rainwater. That's the overflow situation that we're always trying to protect against. But having some of those, especially as we go into the master plan, where there's areas that are demarcated as having the infrastructure to support more development versus the areas that are going to be subject to more restrictions, and have that based in some sort of arithmetic that we can point to in the master plan process, could be useful to explaining it to differing neighborhoods. All right. Thank you both and all. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. Tonight I am bringing you a report from the Arts and Cultural Commission on the state of the arts in the community. You saw in your packet the responses that we received from a survey of our arts community. We still have, this is an interim report. There will be a later report once we have full responses. This is the initial glimpse that you get at the status of what's going on in our community. The reality is the arts are under attack. Many of our local institutions have received cancellations of National Endowment for the Arts grants. Individuals have received cancellations. It directly impacts our creative economy, which you've heard me say repeatedly, generates over $70 million in revenue in the city of Portsmouth and many, many jobs. And then at the state level, the current funding in the budget that we expect to be voted on Thursday cuts the New Hampshire State Council on the Arts budget from $1.5 million, and that's in state funding, to $150,000. The majority of those funds, which are matched by the federal government, by the way, this is a matching program, so it's a $3 million budget currently, go to grants to our local arts institutions across the state. And so when at the state level we cut the budget to $150,000, that means that the maximum matching funds they can get from the federal government is $150,000. So the budget goes to $300,000, which barely will fund staffing. In fact, it won't fund all the staffing, and it will mean no grant money goes out to organizations in the state. So in our initial survey, we've heard that not only organizations, but artists won't even, in some cases, be able to cover their rent. So we could see a major impact in our local economy, especially our arts and cultural economy, from these cuts at the state and federal level. We don't fund the arts directly, the Arts and Cultural Commission, from the city of Portsmouth. Some other cities do provide direct funding. At one point, the city of Portsmouth did provide funding in a pilot program. We were provided a percentage of parking revenues to ArtSpeak at the time. We no longer provide those resources. So the Arts and Cultural Commission, in their charter, was tasked with the job of applying for grants to fund their work. And those grants had to be grants that were designated for municipalities from the state and federal government and from the few arts organizations that do provide those grants. Now that pool of grants has dried up almost completely. There are a few opportunities, but they're very few. So our Arts and Cultural Commission will have difficulties now finding funding support for their work. So they wanted you to be aware of the situation currently in the arts community and how things feel pretty dire. And And then, as a result, they're hoping you'll support my next item on the agenda, which is a proposal that's coming from the Arts and Cultural Commission. The motion is, I move to request the legal department, in conjunction with the Arts and Cultural Commission, draft an arts and cultural banner program policy for the city of Portsmouth to be reviewed by the city council at its September 8th city council meeting. If I get a second, I'll speak to that. Okay. The Arts and Cultural Commission has been reviewing banner programs. And if you think of banners, we're talking about the banners that go downtown on the light poles. We had Portsmouth 400 banners that went up. Across the country, cities have these different programs. So we're looking for ways to better advertise on the behalf of our arts and cultural institutions that, hey, we have a special event this year or a special program, an anniversary. We're not talking about one event that would happen, you know, out of the blue. We're talking about a major event because we're not interested in banners being changed out weekly. The Arts and Cultural Commission is looking at a program where banners could go up 2 to 3 times a year, and organizations would have to apply to go through that process. That we would have to create standards and work with the legal department to create those standards. Several examples have been provided in your packet of communities that do have these standards, and different standards depending upon the community. Some are very well developed, some are not so well developed. But it's an opportunity for those organizations to provide that additional support to the community, and especially to institutions that need it in a particular year. The goal is for it to be fully funded by the institution that's applying for it. So there would be a fee associated with it that would cover the city's cost, including staffing costs to put up banners, remove banners. The entity would also pay for the banners. So we would not anticipate costs on behalf of the city's part. It would be basically a program just to support those institutions by providing them with the opportunity. So I'm just asking for you to give us the opportunity to move forward. We didn't want the Arts and Cultural Commission and the legal department to invest too much time in this effort if it was not something that the council was willing to entertain.
Councilor Cook, any questions? Councilor Blaylock.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Cook, for bringing this up. I just have one question. I know we did these for like the 400th. I just didn't know any other event, like a lot of events we have are, you know, one-day events. So I didn't know other events that you were thinking, other group was thinking of.
They're thinking of events like, I'll give an example of the 50th anniversary of Prescott Park Arts Festival.
Okay.
They would have requested banners for the summer season. So they would have stayed up for 3 months or, 4 months for that season. So we're not talking about kind of a one-off event, but more like for a season to celebrate an anniversary or a major event that maybe doesn't come to the city very frequently. So we have this event, once every 10 years. So that's what they're thinking about. They're not thinking about those individual shows. Yeah.
And Councilor Moreau?
I thank you for bringing this forward. I think it's a good idea. Words of caution. Definitely want it to be, net zero loss to the city, and the liability of what goes on them, like every other sign and advertisement in the city really needs to be looked at and make sure that we're not getting ourselves in trouble based off of our own policy. So just words of caution.
Thank you. And that's where the Arts and Cultural Commission wants to work with the legal department to make sure that we have really very clear guidelines. The cities that have done this and done it effectively have developed extremely clear guidelines and a review process so that they make sure you don't have any challenges or issues with those signs.
Councilor Tabor.
I was wondering how you decide the scope of this. Because your example of Manchester, they have a half a dozen maybe key spots. On the other hand, other communities take an entire street. And those are very different visually. So I wonder how that's going to be decided.
Well, and that hasn't been determined yet. So that would be part of this whole discussion process with what works best for the city versus what would work for organizations. And so the Arts and Cultural Commission envisions that as part of our discussion process in setting up standards. So, and they would come back with a recommendation to the council that is fully vetted through the legal department. And that's the goal, essentially, is to come back and say, this makes the most sense. Maybe it's only along State Street, or maybe it's, or maybe you can have two different banners in different locations. Whatever they do, they don't want to create a burden for the city. So we want to make sure that it's fully funded, and at the same time, make sure it makes sense as a program, because you also don't want to adopt something that an organization doesn't benefit yet pays a significant cost. So.
I think Councilor Cook, getting legal's opinion on this, I think will be important. They can box us in. I know we have said no in terms of folks that have wanted to raise banners before, and so we'll be interested to see if this can be boxed in terms of our ability to have those. Seems like there's precedent, so look forward to hearing that back. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right.
Your Honor, I move to approve and accept the action sheet and minutes of the June 5th, 2025 Parking Traffic Safety Committee meeting.
Second?
There wasn't really anything to approve on this meeting. However, the action items for the City Council reads, and I don't think we have to vote on it, is resident parking voted to advise the City Council that PTS committee believes the city is a well-functioning system and that a drastic change such as this requires further evaluation, and the committee has concerns about both options, which was a 15-minute one and a half-hour one.
Great. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next up, approval of grants and donations, acceptance of donation of 65 at-home heart health screening kits from Service Credit Union to the Portsmouth Police Department.
Your Honor, I move to approve and accept the donation to the police department as presented.
Second?
Any discussion? Thank you to Service Credit Union for the delivery of those. Very much appreciated. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next is the acceptance of the 2025 Spring Healthy Aging Strategic Grant Award to Recreation Department from the Foundation for Seacoast Health in the amount of $25,000.
Your Honor, I move to approve and accept the donation as presented.
Second?
Any discussion?
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money from an organization that I know does a lot. Appreciative of the funds coming to the City of Portsmouth and specifically to the Rec Department and Senior Center for this. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? City Manager's informational items.
If it weren't for the parking item, I could get this done in less than 8 minutes, but I'm not sure I can. So,
I have faith.
Peace Development Authority Board meeting of June 17th acknowledged Paul Breen as getting accredited airport executive status, which is a big deal in the airport management world. The Division of Ports and Harbors Capital Improvement Plan was adopted for the next 6 years, 92% of which is for the Market Street Marine Terminal functional replacement, which was a contractual obligation of the federal government when they rebuilt the Sarah Mildred Long Bridge. And of note in the airport realm, there is the retraction of Canadian leisure travel as seen firsthand by Allegiant. The only other thing I would say is the Fish Pier building on Pierce Island Road is nearing completion. It looks great. And I provided an infographic in the packet, which was handed out at one of the board meetings recently. Has some really good statistics on the Peace Development Authority and its contribution to the local economy. We'll hold on the financial report back. I can tell you, spoiler alert, Peter would tell you if he were up at the podium, that approximately $300,000 is the cost to implement free 15-minute parking everywhere for residents. He could provide more if you like, and I'll hold on that for a moment. The other two items relate to the final draft versions of both the bicycle and pedestrian plan update and the Market Square master plan. We wanted to provide both of them to you and give ample time for you and the public to review and comment. We plan to come back on August 4th for acceptance of both plans. That's all I have.
Thank you, City Manager. Councilor Bagley?
Thank you, Eric. You kind of skipped over the parking one real fast.
Yeah, we're going to go to Peter.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Councilor Moreau, before we get to that.
Just because I tend to lose these within my iPad, is it possible to get each of those plans separately uploaded to our iPads?
Sure.
Just that way I know, I can find it more easily than to have to remember the meeting it was in. Of
course.
To keep going back to it. Thank you.
Judy and Kelly, I said Jude, I was combining Kelly and June. One of the dream team will make that happen.
We will make it.
Thank you.
Yep,
Thank you.
yep.
DPW Director Peter Rice.
Comes.
We've already saved $100,000.
I tried. It's just a minute.
Good evening, Peter Rice, Director of Public Works. Ben Fletcher, the Parking Director, is with me as well, if need to drill down deeper into some of the numbers. As you know, the city's parking program is based on parking principles, which were originally passed and adopted by the council in 2012 and readopted last fall. The parking principles outline the goal of the city's parking program, which, in addition to a number of other things, really is to support the vitality of the city, to benefit residents, businesses, and visitors. The concerns that have been expressed, and we understand, are that the residents have been left behind in this, the benefits that have occurred. As you know, the average homeowner benefits by about $500 off their tax bill based on the revenues of the parking program. However, the concerns are, can we do something to help benefit the residents? And the result is this proposal right now. The projected impact is roughly $300,000. However, it's not entirely the cost and revenue loss that we're concerned about. It's really the unintended impacts of changing our pricing structure in our program. Parking fees are structured to manage behavior. Changing pricing will incentivize more short-term parking as opposed to parking once and walking. As you know, the city's parking operations are interconnected and intentional. Changes will likely have long-term impacts that won't be immediately seen. The recently completed parking utilization study identified a challenge relative to inventory. Changes to short-term parking will exacerbate that. If we did not have an parking utilization, if we did not have an inventory problem, this would be a different conversation and staff would be more supportive of this. However, given the challenges we currently face, we're not comfortable with it. But obviously, at the end, it's a policy decision, and we will implement whatever is decided.
Thank you, Peter. Is it split between, I guess, when we come to the $300,000 number, how do we back into that? And I see Ben Fletcher.
Ben can talk to you about all the specific pieces that go into it.
Great.
Thanks for sticking around, Ben.
Good evening, everybody. So I've really tried to consider behavioral management and what we thought the changes to behavior would be. So there's a direct revenue equation to this loss. Currently, we have about 5,000 transactions a month on Park Mobile from the resident user group, and the minimum right now is $1.25 per hour. Losing that would be roughly $93.75 per month, and then we'd.
Sorry, because we don't have these numbers in front of us. We're 5,000 residents are making a transaction per month, and the minimum requirement is $1.25. Is the assumption that they are only staying for 15 minutes and then leaving?
The assumption is that the behavior will change to the point where they will be moving from space to space.
But wouldn't the Park Mobile app, I guess like the Park Mobile app would be able to implement one free parking session per day?
Yes, but that's not what I was understanding the situation.
That's what's on the table, is a 1 15-minute parking session per day.
Okay, then even so, the assumption is the behavior would change from the normal 2 hours and plus stay to a less than 15-minute to get in and get out.
I guess, okay, but I guess it's a pretty dramatic difference in terms of a changing of behavior if somebody's going from 15-minute spot to 15-minute spot versus a view of if we're doing 1 15-minute spot per day when you come into the downtown.
And certainly, these assessments are based on assumptions. There's no way to know exactly how people's behavior will be changed with this, except to assume and try to be fair about the assumption that the behavior will change to the point where you're seeing a lot more of these very short transactions. With that, you're going to lose that revenue, and you'll still have to pay the 25-cent park mobile fee for those transactions, even if they're non-revenue. And then there's the opportunity cost lost of if somebody's in a space for a short period that's not paying for it, that means the non-resident can't come in and use that space at full rate. So you lose that opportunity cost, and even understanding that some of that revenue is going to be regained in the garages until they're full. You're still talking about $135,000 in my estimation on direct revenue loss, $94,000 on loss of users that would have used the space at full rate, which is $4.51 on average per session for a non-resident user. And then I consider that we would see that's about a 5.23%, those two combined, of the overall revenues budget for meters for FY25, and I would make an assumption that you're going to see a drop in citation revenues equivalent to that. So those three pieces of the puzzle are where I came to that assessment. It could be more, it could be less. I'm assuming it's going to be more. I'm trying to be conservative.
So I guess it would be helpful to see, so we'll have a presentation at the public hearing on this. It would be helpful to have these numbers and the assumptions ahead of time for that. I guess one of the things is, how are we assuming that the assumption is that a person will come down, pay for 15 minutes, go to buy something, and decide because they've used the app and they can increase the amount of time. If they, would increase the time, how are we accounting for that in terms of a loss of revenue, since we would still get the minimum credit card fee? We've only waived the 25 cents that we waive for residents regardless, and the next increment would be an hour. So I don't know how that person would lose us as much revenue because they would be staying for the hour after the 15 minutes, and they would be incurring, just as we have the resident parking program now. So would love to be able to see the data behind this ahead of the presentation on the 14th.
Certainly, I'm happy to provide the data where the pieces of the puzzle that I believe will be part of it. I have heard folks say that they don't come downtown in a vehicle now, but they would if there were the 15 minutes. They would change their behavior to bring a vehicle into the system that's already overcrowded, and that's the real issue. It's not about revenue. My 300,000 is 300,000. We can deal with that, but it's the concern for us is primarily the behavior change and having a greater degree of frustration, a greater degree of congestion, a greater degree of carbon footprint and pollution and the other things, and exacerbating our issues where we're trying to encourage the folks that we have the ability to encourage, that being the local group, to take ulterior modes of transportation other than a vehicle. Because we have very little success in doing that with people that are from outside of town. So.
And I certainly appreciate all of those. I think that is, at least from my perspective, a very walkable, bikeable view. We don't have the infrastructure that supports walking and biking throughout the entire city. We're working on that. But to choose to walk or bike, even for myself, to choose to bike my entire family. One kid that's, it's a choice between like a half-hour trip to downtown or a 3-minute trip to downtown to go into G. Willikers to get a present for a birthday party. Would love if I had the time, but I don't know if that intentional dissuasion of residents to come into the downtown through a lack of this program is worth it in the end if we want to expand to other parts of the neighborhood. But I'll save any, further questions until we have the presentation and the numbers. Councilor Bagley?
Yeah, thanks, Your Honor. I did some quick math, but I've never really been that concerned with the revenue loss here because there's other ways to mitigate it. The concern I would have is maybe to Director Fletcher's point is if you poll people and you only give them one option, do you think parking's too expensive or do you think parking's too hard to find? By making it free, more people are going to use it because that's just human nature, which means, especially at peak times, it's going to be harder to find. So I think that's, irregardless of the revenue, because I think the numbers are going to be less severe than maybe initially proposed. I do think that's the inventory issue is the one that, is of most concern to me.
I certainly get this, and I'll telegraph where I'd go at the public hearing. I think we undercharge non-residents for parking by a significant amount. I think that if we are, if we're looking to manage the inventory, I'd rather manage it on tourism that is coming here until we get to a point where there's a business community is telling us that we need to lower the parking amounts. But, it's not, we're not there at the moment. I think we're looking to manage it on the wrong side of the scales at this point. But that's, my opinion, and one of 9. Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm one of those people who's married to someone who's never registered as a resident and so pays the out of non-resident parking rate still. How many people do you think are in that category and are going to shift? Yeah, how many, because I know that we're already seeing some shift with a change in registration. This especially combined with maybe an increase on non-residents would definitely, I know, cause my husband to think twice about going in and just going ahead and registering his vehicle as local for parking purposes. He does register it here. His birthday was before we started doing that. So I know we've seen some shift, like 96% down to like 90% is my understanding now of
It's moved up. It's moved up
non-residents?
about 1% since we
Okay.
started the program with the tax office
Okay.
on the 3rd of February.
Okay.
So it is moving in that direction already.
Okay. Could you, if it's possible, give us an estimate on that when we discuss this again? How many people you think will shift their registration, or at least register their car with the parking department so they can get local rates?
I can certainly try to come up with something, but again, it would be pure speculation.
Okay.
Because human behavior is human behavior, but you have to speculate that they would move in that direction for sure.
Okay.
It's very difficult to put real numbers to this, which makes it, this not the main part of the discussion. The main part of the discussion for us is we don't have a place to put them, and that creates problems for everybody that uses the system.
Thank you.
Again, to Director Rice's point, if I may, with more inventory, with this problem solved, hopefully in the near future, then we can discuss any and all programs such as this. Be more than happy to do it.
All right, we're going to need a motion to go past 10:30 or to adjourn. Councilor Denton.
Your Honor, I motion to go past 10:30.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Opposed?
Councilor Denton.
Ben, just to, I guess, having a hard time saying this after 10:30 for some reason. Could you simply confirm that the $300,000 estimate is solely on the 15-minute program versus the other portion, which would be codifying the current 3-hour free parking for veterans and expanding it to Gold Star families? That would be nominal.
I didn't take any account at all of that. We already do that. It's just we're expanding that group to the Gold Star group, to include the Gold Star folks, which
Thank you.
just hasn't been the case in the past. We've been doing that for years.
All right.
One more question. Last one. Ben, part of the recommendation that came out of the EDC was the potential to look at off-season potential discounts or adjustment to the parking program to try to drive business during less peak seasons. Is that something that your office, the department has considered, looked into, would be willing to give some type of opinion on at the next meeting?
Certainly, we'd be happy to provide opinion on it. It's important to understand, too, that we don't really have much of an off-season anymore. December is our number 3 month now, every year.
Yeah,
And so it's basically January and February, and that's it.
Yeah, I would say as a downtown business owner, January, February, March are very, very. I usually say actually February, March are the 2 hardest months. You see dramatic decrease in foot traffic, but I think it would be helpful after that recommendation that came out of the ETC is one of those recommendations to potentially look into
Sure.
as an alternative.
Sure.
Thank you. I'm going home.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it. Good way to motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, Portsmouth.